Hope we're doing well. Hello everybody, Raven Knight here. Hope you all are doing well. There's a rainy Monday evening here in South Carolina. Hope you guys are having a good evening. Hope your Monday was all right. I know that for many of you, Mondays are rough. And that's why we do these streams on Monday evenings, to have some levity and to have some enjoyment. So we're going to get things started tonight. As always, welcome. This is the Raven's Roost. This is one of my chill and read streams where I do nothing with you guys except read stories, answer questions, and just have a chill evening. We're not going to be playing any games. We're not going to be watching any clips. We're not reviewing anything. We're just reading some of my old stories and poems. And so if that's your kind of thing, stick around. We'll have a good time. If that's not your kind of thing, understood. I'll see you in another video. But I hope that you guys are excited. Now, as you guys know, last time we finished all of New Epic that was there to read. I need to write more chapters of it. And many of you have said you want me to write more chapters of it, so I will set aside time to work on that. I've got a few things to write first. I've got a few stories I need to work on first, such as I need to finish working on my upcoming story, War of Fate, which is going to be very interesting. And I'm also doing some edits to another story called Undercover, which is sort of a spy thriller kind of thing. But we'll worry about that later. Let's go ahead and get into tonight's reading. Tonight I'm going to read a poem to you guys that I wrote. I believe I wrote this back in 2019, so it was about, I want to say it was about 5 years ago. That sounds about right. This was a poem I wrote by hand, if I recall. Yep, I wrote this by hand. And so I didn't type it out. I wrote this while I was still a teacher. So let's go ahead and read this. The Voyager. Thy eye liken a jewel unearthed to me, glimmers like the Polaris of endless worth, and liken she, let them guide me to thee, so that loss of time turns tears to mirth. Your bosom rise and fall for me and we. The beating of my heart is a tone, and it beats in time with angel wings that flutter o'er capricious zephyrs sown. And with melodious hymn song of joy brings. Oh, my heart may you never sway. My life for she, a trade made readily, may not the tempest that is fate stray. Lest I come home to she all too wearily, but return home I shall Voyager son, to she that to me alone is the rising sun. And that is The Voyager, a short poem that I wrote, but I was practicing a new style of poetry. Had a lot of fun writing it. In fact, I believe that I wrote it as a Valentine's Day poem, so very fitting that I read it today. It was a Valentine's Day poem that I scribbled together on my new quill. I had gotten a quill and ink at the time, and I decided to practice writing with that quill by writing this poem, and it came out, I think, pretty well. I actually really liked this poem. Yeah, it's not my best sonnet, honestly. I would say it's not my best sonnet ever, but I think that it worked out. Yes, it is about missing someone. It is about missing someone. It is love distance. But that is my poem, The Voyager. All right, so as for what we start with now that we've read that, we have a few options. Obviously, I can jump right into Monster Club or the Raptors, obviously. But since New Epic is done, for now, we have a place to fill. We can read something else in its place. And I was thinking that we could read one of my other finished stories, The Tale of Tomaki, which was one of my first, not my first, but one of my first superhero stories. And in fact, Daniel, who is at work tonight, but he might be listening in because he usually works with one earbud in his ear, he said that he would be very interested to hear me read Tomaki. So I will let y'all decide whether I start with Tomaki next or whether or not I go into Monster Club or Raptors first. I will let you guys help decide that. Hey Raven, are you going to read more of the Warden and Nobushi story? No, I'm not going to read any more of that because the last time I read it, everyone behaved very poorly, so I'm not touching that again. Alright, so we will read the Tale of Tomoki. Looks like that's what people are voting for. Alright, so let's see. The Tale of Tomoki. Here we go. Found it. Tale of Tomoki, Chapter 1. I wrote this, if you want to get an idea of how long ago this was, I wrote this June 6th, 2015. So this is almost 10 years old. This is the first chapter of this is almost 10 years old. That is insane. I'll behave good if you do it, Raven. I'm not worried about you. Just had a lot of people who behaved very poorly when I did this, so I'm not going to read it again. Anyway, so the Tale of Tomoki, Chapter 1. Very old, but I did enjoy writing it. So, let's begin. Saiyans, the most elite warrior race in the universe. From our very beginnings, we were born for battle, conquest, and destruction. Our planet, the planet Vegeta, is where we hail from, and it was that place that you were born. Tomoki. Tomoki, what are you doing up so early? I quickly tried to hide the box away. My hands grabbed furiously for a cloth to shove it under as my tail trembled in anxiety, a habit I needed to break. A true Saiyan should never show anxiety or nervousness. She walked downstairs in her nightie, and her sleepy blue eyes gazed at me. Nothing, Belle, I called back, turning innocently to try and hide my twitching, trembling tail. She gazed back at me with a sharp scowl and shook her head. You were listening to that recording again, weren't you? She asked. I hung my head a little. She was right, of course. Belle always seemed to be right about these things. She could read me like a book. She leant down with me and put her soft hand on my head. She smiled, and I looked at her. And you couldn't tell now, as she clearly just rolled out of bed, but she was actually a very attractive young woman. She had long black hair that had red streaks in her bangs. Quite often she had pulled it back into a ponytail too, and she was known as a very rough kind of girl. She was a farmer and worked hard to pay for her home and for me. She never did tell me how she got the farm. I imagine it was passed down in her family, but for as long as I'd known her, she'd had it. She was no Saiyan, though, that was for sure. No, Belle was human. She found me a year ago when I was only 10. I had no home and had been living in the wilds trying to find my purpose. The truth is, I knew what I was. I remembered that much, but somehow I'd forgotten what I was meant to do. Belle took me home, even though she was only around her mid-20s. She treated me with kindness and affection, and when she learned what I was after discovering my space pod, this changed nothing to her. She continued to look after me, promising to help me find my new purpose. I just wanted to hear it one more time. Tomoki, you listen to it every day. You need your sleep, kiddo, she laughed. I don't need sleep. A true warrior can go for days without sleep, I challenged, puffing out my chest defensively. Well, that may be true, she poked my chest, forcing me to exhale and cough. But you're not a warrior yet. You're a growing boy and growing Saiyan. Fine, a growing Saiyan boy, and you still need your sleep. You have a big day tomorrow. I huffed and crossed my arms. And Saiyans don't need school either. They do when they live on Earth, she laughed. Besides, as long as I'm your guardian, you do as I say. I never asked for you to be my guardian, I snapped back. Belle looked a little taken aback by this remark, but sighed and looked at me with a serious gaze. No, you don't. And you're free to leave whenever you want. But the truth is, Tomoki, that there aren't a lot of humans in this town who are going to be very happy about taking in a wild, violent, ill-tempered, and prideful little Saiyan like you. So until you learn how to fend for yourself and make a living, I'm the best chance you've got, runt. I hated when she pulled that argument, because I knew I could never beat it. So, do you want to leave now? She asked. No, I grumbled, and she nodded. Smart choice. Now, to bed, she ordered. I grimaced and took a few hesitant steps away from the remains of my pod. For some reason, Belle had decided to keep the parts of my pod, and that was how she found that recording. She found it and listened to it, and that's how she learned what I was. and how I came to learn about my people. Can I hear it, at least until it gets to the part about the legendary Super Saiyan? I asked. That was my favorite part of the whole recording. If I could just hear that one more time, then I'd gladly go to sleep, dreaming of that amazing power. Belle groaned, but smiled at me. You're impossible. Really quickly, she dragged out the box and clicked the play button. I ran to it happily, and I sat down, watching the box as if it were playing a video before me. The voice spoke again, that strange electronic but oddly familiar voice. We Saiyans are studied from the day we are born. Our power levels are red. Those with high power levels are allowed to remain on the planet for special training. Those with low power levels are sent off to weaker planets with the purpose of destroying the resident life forms, and in this way you might still prove your worth as a warrior. Belle huffed at this. She never liked that part, and to be honest, I wasn't too fond of it either. Whatever accident I had upon landing on Earth, I had lost all desire to destroy the life here. Certainly, I was far stronger than they were, and crushing them would be easy as I grew up, but I didn't desire that kind of purpose anymore. Belle didn't like it either, and often asked what kind of race treats its children like that. That part kind of bothered me too. If they sent me off to this weak world to destroy it, did that mean that I was weak myself? Was I a bad Saiyan? And what did I need to do to better myself? If destroying the life on this earth could somehow prove that I was a better Saiyan, how could it, though? If they're weaker than I am, and killing weaklings, how can that possibly prove my strength? A Saiyan's power comes from their tail. When we look upon a full moon, our tail allows our bodies to undergo powerful transformations into great apes, and we crush all that stand in our way. But there is yet one transformation, one that exists only in legends. I gripped the ground hard. This was it. My favorite part of the whole recording. The part I'd been dying to hear. Greater than any great ape is the ultimate transformation of a Saiyan, the transformation into the legendary Super Saiyan, a warrior with power so incredible and so overwhelming that it is said that no creature can stand against them. Their power is said to emit a golden aura that ignites the air into flames. The rage of a Super Saiyan is said to be something of true splendor. However, this transformation is not meant for the likes of you who have been cast from... That's enough of that. Bedtime. Belle reached over and switched off the recorder, and I grumbled but didn't argue. I had heard the best part, and the part I wanted to hear. The rest was just talking about how I was such a low-level and low-class warrior, not meant to eat off the feet of the elite warriors of my kind. I didn't care about that silly stuff. It was the Super Saiyan legend that I loved the most. I got up and began my walk upstairs with Belle walking behind me. Belle, someday I'll be a Super Saiyan, I said proudly. Will you? Belle laughed. Don't say I can't do it, because I will, I shouted. I'm going to be the strongest warrior ever. I'm going to be a Super Saiyan. Well, that sounds wonderful, and I'm sure you'll get there someday. But for now, can we just try becoming a sleeping Saiyan? She asked, jokingly shoving me towards the room she'd created for me. I stuck out my tongue and walked towards my room, jumping into bed. I wasn't mad at Belle. She meant well, of course. But being a human, she could never understand a Saiyan's pride, a Saiyan's nature. I will become stronger, and I'll become a Super Saiyan someday, I grinned, closing my eyes and letting sleep finally take me. As I slept, I dreamed of a Saiyan warrior. I dreamed of a Saiyan with golden hair, and an aura so powerful that the ground itself trembled. At his feet was a body. The body of his enemy? Of course, it had to be, because no enemy could stand against a Super Saiyan. The Super Saiyan roared at the sky as his power exploded, and I smiled. I couldn't wait till the day I achieved that power. All right, and that is the first chapter. It's short compared to the other chapters, but it was an introductory chapter. For anyone wondering if this is the same world as actual Dragon Ball, no, it's not. I was kind of creating a fan-made world. You'll see a lot of stuff in it, but you'll never see Dragon Ball-related characters. All right, well, let's move on to Chapter 2. Okay, and we'll decide if we do chapter 3 or not. So let's do chapter 2 first. This was written in August 5th, 2015. So it was a month. Actually, no. This was actually 2 months after I wrote the first one. So I guess I was giving it time to fester to see how I felt about it. But all right. Let's read on. And for those of you wondering how to spell Tomaki, because I've seen it pop up in chat, this is how you spell it. So y'all know. All right. And for those of you also wondering, for some of you who are familiar with the Dragon Ball lore, you know that all the Saiyans in Dragon Ball have name puns. Their names are a reference to vegetables. And so I wanted to make Tomakis a reference to a vegetable too, so I named him after a tomato, Tomaki. Now, many of you may say tomato's a fruit, and all I can say to that is Bob was a tomato in VeggieTales, and that show was called VeggieTales, so your argument is invalid. All right, so Cuban Warlord. I don't know much about Saiyans. What are they? Cuban, are you familiar with Dragon Ball Z? Are you familiar with Dragon Ball Z? If you are, then good. Goku is a Saiyan. Vegeta is a Saiyan. They're basically an alien race that looks human, but they have monkey tails, and they are powerful warriors who can shoot energy from their bodies, all kinds of cool stuff. All right, so let's keep going. Chapter 2. Fight, 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 fight! The chants, like a sacred mantra, fueled the fire in my gut. It was intense. It was right. My fists opened and closed in anticipation, and my tail twitched excitedly. My legs were spread, ready to dodge and then kick. My right hand was pulled close to my chin, and my left arm was extended outward. Both hands tightened into my ultimate weapons. My hair, wild and untamed as ever, blew slightly across my forehead and eyes as wind blew past it. Before me stood Jackson, my enemy. You ready to go down, monkey ass? Jackson guffawed. Glad you have that tail. Makes a nice target. I'll just grab it and yank you down. My eyes narrowed and my teeth were bared. His stupid mouth. That stupid babbling. It's his mouth that got him into trouble. Always running it. Always looking for someone to mock. Couldn't he just zip it shut for one damn moment? It was his mouth that had brought us to this point. The playground behind the school was meant for the elementary schoolers, but now it was the battleground for Jackson and I. We were both 17. We were both around the same height. He had blonde hair and I had dark brown. His eyes were blue and mine were green. My body was toned and fit. He was barely able to buckle his belt. And yet, of all of our similarities and differences, he chooses my tail to insult. Now all of the high school students and my peers were outside on this dusty playground, waiting for us to exchange blows. The roar of their chanting echoed around me, and I had to restrain myself from grinning. A fight. A real battle. How rarely did I get to experience that joy. I'll give you one last chance to take back those annoying insults, I growled. Apologize, and I'll stop this right now. Apologize for what, Tomaki? Jackson mocked. For telling it like it is? I think you're scared. No, I'm just being polite. In all honesty, I was hoping you'd decline. That means I can do this without any regrets. I charged him, and before he could even comprehend what I was doing, I'd struck him hard in the chin. He fell back with a dazed look in his eyes, like when you lose your footing without realizing it. He was stunned, and I pressed the attack. My fists connected, and blood shot from his mouth. It felt great. I struck him again, and in the chest this time. When he bent over to grab his broken rib, I kicked him hard in the cheek, sending him sprawling to the dirt. It was pathetic. He struggled to get to his feet, but I was already on top of him. You loser! I roared back at him. How dare you mock my tail? It's the mark of what I am. I'm a Saiyan. I'm a warrior. What would a weakling like you know of my warrior heritage? In truth, my pride over my tail was not why I was angry. It was his weakness. I'd been holding back, because I knew if I'd hit him with everything I had, I probably would have killed him. I wanted a real challenge. I wanted to discover my true potential. I felt so empty, so alone. What was I lacking? And it made me angry looking at this pathetic loser mocking me for no reason, while I was still struggling to find anything to wake up the beast inside me. Tomiki, you stop it right now! My fist stopped, and I spun to see a woman walking up to me. Her eyes were angry, and her arms were crossed. I hated when Belle looked at me like that. It always made me feel so guilty. I growled and stood up, getting off the sniveling and whimpering Jackson. Apologize, Belle. Right now, Tomiki, she ordered. I turned and rolled my eyes. Sorry, asshole. I then marched past her, leaving the crowd of disappointed and whispering students behind me. Belle followed after me, shaking her head and leading me towards the car. She'd come to pick me up, and I knew that I was about to get an earful of a lecture. Belle had changed little since when I was a child. She still had the same hair, though she now wore it in a ponytail more often. She had taken to smoking, but that was just from the stress of her work, and she didn't do it often. She had added 2 new tattoos on her arm. One was of a rose and the other of a cross. The rose vine was wrapped around the top of the cross like a crown of thorns, and she also had a small scar on her shoulder. 2 years ago, I discovered my hidden ability to use Ki, the inner energy that all beings possess. I could harness it and release it into small energy blasts. This was a skill all Saiyans could do, and one day, while in an intense training session for myself, I got excited and fired off a blast into her shoulder. It had left a long gash, but she never stopped smiling despite my apologies and my concern. She said she was proud of me for it, though I doubted she was as proud now. Honestly, Tomiki, this is the 4th fight this month. 5th, actually, if you count that one. Would you just shut up? Belle snapped angrily. You should show more self-control than this. I'm trying, all right, I argued. It's not so easy. It's in my blood, okay? Yeah, I know that, she muttered, rubbing her shoulder absent-mindedly. Tomiki, have you given any thought at all to... I already told you no, I answered. Won't you just think about it at least? It's a waste of time, Belle, I grumbled. She was talking to me about the same old thing again, and I was sick of it. Far on the outskirts of our little town was a special dojo hidden in the trees. The owner was a man named Hayato. He was an old friend of Belle who had come to visit once or twice. A master martial artist, I suppose, and Belle thought that maybe I could go and train with him. Learn to control my violent tendencies, she called it. It's a nice sentiment and all, but what's the point? I don't want to repress my fighting instincts. I want to harness them. I want to push them further and further. I want to fight and not hold back. Look, I talked to Hayato the other day, and he says that he'd love to at least just see what you can do. Why not just give him a shot? Maybe if I have time, I answered gruffly. I didn't mean a word of it, though. I just didn't see the use. I was glaring out the window of the moving car, watching as other cars, trees, and buildings just passed me by. Tomiki. She fell silent then. I didn't look at her. I didn't want to admit how I felt. My feelings? Guilt. I shouldn't feel guilty, and yet when she would speak with that tone, look at me in that way, it made me feel so guilty in myself and my actions, and it also sparked my fury. It made me angry to be guilty. Look, what's the big deal, Belle? I snapped. The big deal is that these fights are becoming too frequent. If I hadn't stepped in, you might have... What? What? Killed him? I shouted. That's not what I said, Tomiki, Belle grumbled. It's what you were thinking, though, I hissed. Killing. It's what we Saiyans were born to do. Our entire existence was about dominating and destroying. I was sent to this planet to do just that, and yet I had no desire to. Despite the fact I had all the means to do so. I had the strength, the power, and the fighting instincts to destroy any normal human. I just didn't want to. It didn't appeal to me. To merely fight was enough for me. But it was the fear of me going too far and killing someone. That was what Belle feared most. She constantly begged me to train with Hayato so I could control myself, so I wouldn't kill anyone. But no one was dead yet, and I didn't want to kill anyone, so why even worry? I knew when to quit. I knew when to hold back. Tomiki, look, you can't keep doing this, Belle ordered as we pulled back up to the house. She got out of the car and I climbed out as well, slamming the door behind me. Sooner or later, Tomiki, you'll make a mistake. I'm not a thug, Belle. Have you seen what you do to people you fight? They get what they deserve, I snarled. Oh, and what did this one do? Look at you funny? Call you a bad word? Tomiki, you call yourself a warrior, so start showing some thick skin. It's not about the insults, Belle. It's about the fight, Belle finished. I know, you said it. It's that damn Saiyan blood of yours, which is why it's imperative that you learn some self-control. I know you have a desire for combat, but that doesn't mean you should pursue it. Look, I'll figure it out, I growled, walking into the kitchen with her hot on my tail. I heard her slam her hand down on the kitchen table to get my attention, so I spun to face her. And how many more people have to be hospitalized before you do? Take some responsibility for your actions. Stop talking to me like a child, I roared back. You're my child, Belle screamed. The entire kitchen went dead quiet, as her words seemed to stop time itself. We stared at each other, shock in our expressions. Though I couldn't see my face, I could tell from her own eyes that I was staring in stunned amazement. Never had Belle ever said that before. She never called me her child before, or referred to me as family. I felt an odd feeling in my stomach, a guilty feeling again. I'd never called Belle my mother before, just as she'd never referred to me as a son before. Certainly when I was enrolled in school, Belle signed all the paperwork as my guardian, but she'd never addressed me as a child of her own. Did she really feel like that? What? Belle, what did you say? I asked. It's nothing. Nothing. Just forget about it, Belle muttered darkly. Look, if you think you can control your temper and your violence, then you are certainly capable. Belle, no, you're right, Tamaki. You're not a child anymore, she stated plainly. Breathing in deeply and speaking softly, she went on. I shouldn't talk down to you. You can make your own choices. No, Belle, you called me your child. I need to go to the store, Belle cut in. I've got to pick up some things for dinner tonight. Why don't you stay here and work on your homework? I need to get some fresh air anyway. I watched her grab her keys and hurry to the door. Belle, I'm sorry for... Don't say it, Tamaki, she whispered darkly. I know what you're going to say. But you have your pride as a Saiyan, right? It's how this whole thing started. I thought I could fix it. I thought I could make you into something better than just a violent fighter. But I can see that's all you want to be. I hoped you could be more. So I'm the one who's sorry, Tamaki. It's my fault for trying to make you something you never wanted to be. And with that, she walked out and closed the door, leaving me standing stupidly in the kitchen, drowning in my own guilt and aching stomach. I fell down on the chair behind me and glared at my hands. My dirty, bloody hands from my fight with Jackson. She'd seen them and felt ashamed. My words had cut her deeply. Her own words had revealed more than she was prepared to share. It was all crashing so fast. Damn it. Damn it! I roared. I hated this feeling of guilt and anger. I hated when I felt this way. I wanted to talk to her, to bring reason back and restore the balance to the way things were. I could fight every man on earth, but to fight with Belle... how could I fight her? She wasn't like other people. She wasn't like... I cared about her. I didn't want to hurt her. Not like this. And yet, this desire to spare her the pain of my wrath was always won over by my Saiyan pride. Where it all begins, I hissed at myself. I slammed my fist against the wall, leaving an impressive dent. Damn it. I'm such an idiot. All right. And that is chapter 2. Do y'all want me to read chapter 3, or do you want to take a break? Belle reminds you of Bellamere from One Piece? Yeah, that was the point. She was heavily inspired from Bellamere, actually. All right, we got a chapter 3 request. Good. All right. All right, we got another request for more. All right, let's do more. Yeah, good. Let's do it. Was Broly a Saiyan? Yes, he was. All right. The Tale of Tamaki, chapter 3. Here we go. This one was written August 26, 2015. I sat down and groaned, not wanting to move, not wanting to do anything. The words that Belle had said still echoed in my head. They stung me, and yet they opened my eyes as well. Did she really see me as her child? Had she been hiding this from me? I narrowed my eyes and reflected back. It made sense. She's always given me that motherly sort of persona around me. She wasn't just a guardian sometimes. There were times I could think back on where she actually showed a loving sort of concern that she had no obligation to show to me. Belle. I muttered her name, wanting to say more, but stopping myself halfway. I couldn't say it. Not now. Not after all I'd done to her. Damn it all, I growled. This isn't right. I need to apologize. Apologize? What kind of Saiyan warrior apologizes for anything? Such a thing would shave me. It would ruin my pride, and something in the back of my mind, deep within my being, knew this and was trying to remind me of that. But I shoved my pride aside. I had to do this. This wasn't something I could put off. I owed this to her. I didn't care about my pride right now. I couldn't. Not when I'd hurt Belle like that. That look on her face seemed to make any hesitance burn and blow away like ash. I leapt to my feet, grabbed my coat, and sprinted out the door to find her. She'd taken her car, but I was fast enough on my feet and I'd catch up. According to part of the recording in my pod, I'd learned that Saiyans were capable of flight. I looked forward to the day I could do that. But I guess I wasn't at that level yet. Running fast would be the best I could do. I'm sorry, Belle, I whispered into the dusk. The cool night air slapped my face as I sprinted. The world was a blur and the wind whistled in my ears. A howling noise that seemed to preach of my woe and my humiliation. What I was about to do would be one of the hardest things I'd ever done. Saying sorry. It seemed such a simple thing. Sorry was always just a word to me, and it always was. When I was in trouble or did something wrong, sorry was my escape from trouble. Such an easy word to say, and such a meaningless thing it was. I'd never said sorry to mean it or to truly show remorse, for in truth, I never ever regretted my actions. And even if I did, I would never seriously apologize for them. I'd simply curse and blame myself for my mistakes and vow to never make them again. But my pride, my hard and stubborn pride, would never permit me to be so weak as to actually show remorse. But now my heart was aching and my stomach churned with real guilt. The pain and failure on Belle's face was etched on my memory and drove me to madness. My heart and my pride battled it out with each step. Could I apologize with true remorse and make things right between us? Or would my pride stand above and beyond? I didn't want to guess which right now. The only thing I wanted was to find Belle and confront her. Finding her would give me the answer. As I approached the middle of town, the rain seemed to pelt down upon me with a force that stung my skin. I could tell that something wasn't right either. The air was too quiet and it stank of something putrid, something that I hadn't smelled before. Not even the downpour could mask it. When I finally got to the store, I was horrified by the sight before me. The convenience store was on fire and was crumbling. Bodies lay scattered on the parking lot like scattered straw, and cars were crushed and destroyed like toys. What had done this? What could have this kind of power? But then an even greater fear clutched my heart. Oh no, Belle! I sprinted through the debris, checking bodies and injured, trying to find Belle. Had she been here? Had she been hurt? I looked and my body went rigid and petrified when I saw her car parked on the left-hand side of the store. She'd been here. Was she somewhere inside the store? I ran to the burning building to go inside and check. Hold it, Saiyan! I froze and spun around at the sound of the voice and gaped. Standing there were three figures, all of which looked positively massive. On the right side was a scrawny man with long hair and shallow sunken eyes. He was wearing what looked like a shiny metal skeleton that wrapped around his body and hugged it tight. This strange endoskeleton had small nodes that attached to his skin and likely to his muscle. What on earth was it? The one on the left was larger and more muscular. He too had a strange contraption on his back, but in his case it looked more like a tank. It looked like a giant log-sized thermos filled with yellow liquid. The thermos had veins coming off of it that ran along his arms, legs, and chest. The veins pumped this liquid that I could only assume was some kind of steroid into his body. His eyes were bloody red and his teeth reminded me of a shark. But it was the man in the middle that caught my attention the most. His body was hidden inside a large shell that looked something like a large egg or ball. 4 large mechanical limbs grew from its structure like it was some kind of 4-limbed egg robot. The right arm had a huge cannon-like device on it, and the left arm had a round defensive device on it in the shape of a shield. Lightning pulsed from it as electricity surged out of the mechanical bindings. The legs were enormous and heavily armored to protect it from attackers from below. Strapped to its back was a giant metal pack of sorts that I was sure held all manner of weaponry and devastating tools. It was a monstrous machine, being piloted by what I could only describe as a feeble little man with a large beard. I could barely see him through the eggshell-like dome hatch, but could see he was bald. He had a large beard and had one eye missing from his face. He was smirking at me coldly, and I glared back at him. I didn't need any education to know that this was the man responsible for all of this. "Who are you?" I demanded. "How do you know my race?" "Simple enough," the man in the robot smirked. "The rumor of a boy with a tail in this town has spread well beyond this place. After some careful research, we've learned what you are. Learned of your genealogy and your kind. You're a threat to everyone on this planet." "So what? You come here to kill me?" I asked. "Sorry to say, but I have no desire to harm this planet or its inhabitants. I've got other things to deal with," I shouted back. "Oh, yes, we learned as much from our information gathering," the man laughed. "Fortunately for us, though, that doesn't matter. We're not just here to kill you. We're here to affirm the power of my creations. These battle exoskeletons." His friends flexed their suits, or exoskeletons, as if to show them to me. Hard to miss them, really. "If I can kill a Saiyan with these suits, then governments around the world will pay out of their ass to get their hands on them for military purposes. I'll make a fortune off of these designs." I stared at him in disgust. That was what this was about? That's all you want? Money? Not just money, you brat. I want a fortune. With these creations, a new military age is coming, and I will be the forefront of that age. I will profit from this advancement, and when the human race learns of the existence of alien races such as yourselves, then the desire for my weapons, the weapons that can destroy you, will grow as well. Look around us, boy. Do you even read the news articles? Mutations, massive new weapon advancements. It's the cutting edge of the future, boy, and I will be at its forefront. Perhaps it was my Saiyan pride again, but somehow his words infuriated me. He walked into battle merely to profit. He does not battle for profit or even for justice and protecting his race, but instead only so he might make money off of it. "In all these people," I hissed, "why'd they have to die? It was me you were after." "Don't act like you care." This time the man with the odd steroid veins laughed at me. "We know you Saiyans only live for combat. You don't care about others. But we figured if we caused a big enough mess, it might draw a battle-crazed animal like you out to challenge us." Was that all I was? A battle-crazed beast? No, that couldn't be right. But then I remembered Belle's words. I thought I could fix it. I thought I could shape you into something better than just a violent fighter. But I can see that's all you want to be, and I hoped you could be more. I remembered Belle's words, and I staggered from them. It was true, at least in her eyes and theirs. She had tried to keep me from becoming some battle-loving animal, and yet that seemed to be all I'd ever become. Were they right about me? Was Belle right? Was that all I was? Belle. Her face flashed before my eyes, and my eyes narrowed in focus. There was a woman here with black hair and red streaks in it. She wore it in a ponytail. Was she here? Did you see her? If she was in the store, she's probably dead now, the man chuckled. But why should you care? I didn't answer. I felt my body shaking. She couldn't be dead. I'd know it. But they'd pay all the same. They'd suffer. They wanted a battle-crazed Saiyan. I'd give it to them. Bastards! I charged full force at the man in the robot and swung my strongest punch into his armor. And with a song like a gong and cracking bones, I winced in pain as I only made a slight dent in his armor. Sorry, boy, but this armor's heavily enforced. It could withstand a dynamite explosion at point-blank range, and your monkey punches won't even crack it. With a swing of his massive arm, I felt the robotic limbs strike me. I withstood it and rebound, feeling familiar instincts kick into me. I pulled back my arms and fired 2 key blasts from my hands. The 2 men beside him rushed in to defend, and I used that moment to attack them at once. I rushed to attack one of the muscular vein man. I shot a kick at his head, expecting to land him flat on his ass, but no such luck. What? He caught my foot. My kick was like a baby strike. I struggled to escape his grip, but it was like a clamp was holding my leg in place. The drugs pumping through Adrian's body right now are from a special form of adrenaline drug that strengthen his body to superhuman levels, and as long as the pack remains on his back, he's unmatched in sheer power. The monster Adrian raised his fist and brought it down on me. I raised my arms to defend, but the strike blew through my defenses, and I felt my arms give way. The ground cracked beneath me as he slammed me to the pavement. I raised both hands and fired a large key blast at Adrian's face, point blank, blinding him and allowing me to roll away. Clever! But now let's see if you can hold out against Jason. I turned just in time to see this Jason rush in for me, the metal outer skeleton of his humming, slightly suit. He struck at me in fluid and rapid-style martial arts moves that I could only barely dodge and evade. I saw a punch come from my chin, and I grabbed his wrist to block it. Ah! I screamed as an electric shock coursed through my body. That humming sound was an electric current. His skeleton outfit that he wore outside of his body was filled with electricity. It was an offensive and defensive weapon. If he touched me, even once, I'd feel it in more ways than one. I was thrown backwards by the energy, and I tried to use the same energy attack as before, launching a huge key blast for him to try and destroy his skeleton. Die! I dodged out of the way and smirked. It seemed like the skeleton didn't weigh him down in the slightest. I growled, feeling the pain in my body. My arms ached from blocking Adrian's fists. My body tingled and shook from the electric shock of Jason's armor. And then there was the mysterious man in his suit. He marched forward and lowered his right arm, the large gun on it charging. This entire fight has been filmed by a camera on my mech suit, the man laughed. You were dispatched so easily, it's almost pathetic, Zayn. But thank you for demonstrating the true power of my creations. And remember this name, boy, in your final moments, won't you? I say this for posterity's sake. Know that the inventions of one Dr. Nathaniel Richardson were the end of your life. Remember that, won't you, for the next few seconds you continue to breathe? I couldn't dodge, even if I wanted to. My body wouldn't respond anymore. I was doomed. The sound of a gunshot rocketed through the air. I gasped as I looked to see a figure leap in front of me and wrap me in a hug, and then the force of kinetic energy that blasted the figure into me and launched me backwards. I hit the ground hard, but was uninjured, and the figure on top of me hadn't let go. I sat up and saw strands of black hair with long red streaks in them. Belle? Tomiki, what are you doing here? She coughed. I tried to lift her up when I felt blood on her back. I trembled and looked at her face. Her eyes were glazed over and blood rolled from her mouth like drool, and I felt fear clutch my heart. Oh God, no, Belle! I lifted her up and rolled her onto her back so I could look at her condition. Her body was burned and beaten. She must have run out of the burning store behind us based on the black scars and burns on her arms and legs. Her hair was burned and a little singed, but none of the things caught my eye like the enormous bullet wound in her chest that was pumping blood like a fountain. It covered my hands as I held her in my arms. She coughed, and I felt my heart break. Her blood and tears mixed with the rainwater, creating a pool. Tomiki, look at you. You're all beat up. Belle, stop talking. I need to get you help, I pleaded. She just laughed and coughed painfully, shaking her head as I struggled to stop the blood from flowing out of her with my hands. Why? Why did you do that? You were so mad at me earlier, and I thought you'd given up on me. I was coming here to make you come back. Tomiki, Belle giggled. The pained way in which she giggled stabbed me in the heart. I didn't give up on you. I never did. You're a good boy. You just don't know it. You don't know it yet. But why? Just why, damn it? I said. Isn't this what a mother does for her son? Hot tears rolled from her cheeks onto my hand, making my fingers shake. What? Tomiki, I'm so sorry. Maybe I was stupid for it, but to me, I did always see you as a son. The silly and wild baby boy I never had. And no matter how silly and how crazy you acted, I put up with it because you were my boy. I stared at her in disbelief, almost forgetting to hold pressure on her wound. I quickly snapped out of my stupor and resumed trying to maintain her. I felt my lip quivering, my eyes brimming over with unmistakable tears. I could see them even through the raindrops on her cheeks. Belle, I whimpered. I'm sorry. I thought that someday we might be a real family, so I pushed, selfishly, wanting to be your mother. No, don't be sorry, I screamed. Please, look, don't say that. I never said it before. I know I never said it because of my stupid pride, but Belle, you are my mom, okay? You are my mom. As I cried these words, I shattered all the pride and selfishness that I had left. I ripped them away and spoke my true mind to her, without any reservation, all truth. I told her the truth. Maybe it was the first time in my life that I told her the truth. But I had to. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for never telling you. I'm sorry for yelling at you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I was so horrible to you. And God damn it, please don't die. Stay alive. Stay alive so I can treat you like I should have from the start, okay? I take everything back. Just, please let me be your son. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. I screamed those words as if they were the bandages that could mend her wound. But all she did was smile and place her weak, trembling hand on my cheek. Tomiki, you have no idea how happy you made me. I'm so proud of you, my brave little boy. Mom, I whispered the words to her and she beamed at me as her eyes filled up. There was love in them, but there was pain. Mom, please. I love you, Tomiki. I love... Her eyes closed and her breath escaped her lips like a gentle breeze. The blood stopped pumping from her wound and her heart was no longer breathing. Belle! I shook her limp body, but I knew the truth. And I knew she wouldn't answer. Belle, my mother, was dead in my arms. Tears ran freely from my eyes, and there was no pride to hide behind. No selfish pride to hold back those tears, because I'd torn all that away to tell Belle the truth. To tell my mother the truth. I fell forward, burying my face in her bloody, lifeless chest, and I cried. I cried and I screamed. Belle! I screamed. My roar reached the heavens as thunder and lightning cracked overhead, professing the grief I felt. I cried pitifully for her, and I didn't care who saw or heard me. I'd lost her. I'd lost my mother. Are you quite done with your little performance? I heard the doctor's voice. I heard that sickening and selfish growl. Why are you crying so much? She was a fool for running headlong into the line of fire. If she just stayed back, she could have lived longer. Suddenly, my body went rigid. The tears stopped and something clicked in my mind. A spark that I'd never felt before. What? I hissed. We were here to kill you, not her. If she'd stayed out of it she might have lived. If she died, it's her own fault, the doctor scoffed. But don't fret, you'll join her soon enough. The thunder above my head shook the sky, and that spark that lit in my body was roaring to life as an inferno. Something deep within me was awakening, a dormant explosion that had no barriers anymore. The rain that struck my body almost instantly evaporated into hissing steam and lifted off of me. The very air I was giving off was too much for it to handle. As I stared at Belle's peaceful face, that monster's cold and twisted words kept echoing in my mind like a bad recording. It fueled the fire, fueled the rage, and then it exploded. And that was chapter 3. Well, chapter 2. No, yep, chapter 3. Do you wish to hear chapter 4 now, or should we save it? There we go. Needed something to drink. I feel better now. Hey Raven, why are the Saiyans called Saiyans? Google it. All right, I've got 2 votes. I've got 2 votes for one more. Got one to move on to Monster Club. We got another. Oh, yep. Okay. All right. We'll do chapter 4, but then we'll move on. Chapter 4 will be the last one we read. Then we move on to Monster Club. Chapter 4. I wrote this August 27th, 2015. Rage roared from me like within a primal beast, and energy erupted from my body like a volcanic eruption. I roared at the heavens in my pain and my rage, which had both become one being. My roar turned to lightning in the sky and thunder across the heavens. The ground trembled at my feet and rocks leapt about like crickets. The clouds above rolled over me as it dawned to me. I became aware of an aura generating from my body. It was golden in color. My body felt such a surge of immense power. It was almost staggering. Every part of me felt like it had been enhanced to 100 times what I was used to. My roar called forth more and more energy until at last I felt like my rage and my agony had swallowed me. But that was hardly anything mattering. What mattered was the body at my feet. That beautiful body that I had wronged so horribly. What mattered were the ones who killed her. "I will make you suffer," I snarled. "I'll never forgive you." I turned and I roared again, and when I did, I noticed a tremor of horror run through them. Good. I wanted them to be afraid. I wanted them to know what waited for them. I would make them pay for every drop of my mother's blood that they'd spilled. "What the hell's going on?" Richardson gasped. What kind of trick is this? Your hair, your tail, golden, your eyes, your freaking eyes. "Boss, what do we do?" Jason asked. "It doesn't matter," Richardson snapped. "Golden or not, he's still the same thing we were just beating earlier. Kill him and let's move on." "I'll take care of it," Adrian barked, charging towards me like a rhino. I held my ground. I did not feel a hint of fear, only anger. This beast was nothing but an obstacle, and I would not merely overcome it. I would crush it. He swung his massive fist at my face, the same fist that had planted me in the dirt earlier. But I was no longer the same. I could feel the difference. I could stop him. I held out my own hand and his fist met it, and the colliding of our hands caused a crack sound as a fist was stopped dead in its tracks. He grunted and growled like a beast, trying to push through my hand. I pushed back, and with a roar that was akin to the thunder over my head, I threw his hand to the side and slammed my own fist into his face. I might as well have punched into a man made of pudding. His whole body jerked back and collapsed to the ground on his back, groaning in agony. 3 of his teeth had fallen out on impact. "Adrian!" Richardson shouted. "Impossible! Impossible! How'd he do that?" "You son of a bitch!" Jason ran at me next. I remembered his lightning touch. He leapt at me as if to tackle me. I normally would have avoided him, but another idea crossed my mind. The moment Jason made contact, I felt the electricity surge into my body. I gritted my teeth in pain, and then snarled in rage. This pain was nothing compared to my anger. I roared again and expelled my own energy outwards like a shockwave. The electricity and Jason himself felt it and were repelled backwards away from me by it. I then jumped on top of Jason in a single bound, summoning forth a massive energy beam into my hands, drawing it from the latent power that I'd somehow awakened. The energy, like this new aura I was sporting, was golden, glowing like a small sun. I fired it, and the energy struck Jason, burning his flesh and completely destroying his suit. He was launched like a football across the parking lot and crashed into a car. And he wasn't moving. I then turned my attention to the last one of the 3, to Richardson. This can't be happening," he shrieked, all of his bravado gone. "What in the hell are you?" That was a good question, but how could he possibly know what I was? I knew, though. I was the Saiyan of legend, the story I used to listen to over and over again from that old pod recording. I had become a Super Saiyan. I only wish that Belle could see me now. I'd done it, but no. She couldn't see me now. Her sacrifice, that was what had awakened the warrior. It was because of her I had attained this level. And my memory shot back to when I was a child. That dream I had of the golden Saiyan warrior standing over the bloody body as he roared at the heavens. I had thought the body on the ground was a foe that was vanquished. It wasn't. And as I understood what that body was, I felt nothing but rage and pain. I wish I had never obtained this power. "You'll pay!" I roared. harshly at myself, my energy exploding once more, creating a small earthquake around us. Oh, you think it'll be that simple, do you? Richardson laughed, nervously trying to regain some of his old bluster. My Achilles suit is the strongest armor I've ever crafted. You barely dented it before, and no matter what you've become now, there's no way you'll rip through it. Normally I would have taken this as a personal challenge, but I didn't. No, rather I saw that armor and I knew that I not only could rip through it, I would. He swung his weapon arm forward and opened fire at me. The bullets were so slow to me that I easily sidestepped each one as if walking out of the way of someone throwing a softball. I got up close, then sprinted in, close enough that I could reach his metal suit. I struck the suit, and my fist went through it as if I were punching into water. There was so little resistance I could feel the soft belly of the good doctor within, and with a scream of pain and shock, Richardson tried to strike at me with his suit. I leapt backwards, evading the attack. How'd you do that? You freak! You monster! He screamed. He dropped down onto all fours, and the back of his suit opened to reveal a missile. With a sound that resembled a truck firing up, the missile launched and screamed at me. The missile exploded in front of me, but my aura like a shield defended me from the blast, and I leapt straight into the air, looking down at the bastard who'd killed my mother. I pulled both hands to the side and began to draw forth that same energy. I pulled harder, pulled more and more energy. I could feel the power of my ki building between my hands in that golden form. The sun that I'd created from before was building again, and it was more powerful this time. The vision of Belle's face flashed before my eyes, her final words whispering in my head. I love you, Tomiki. They pained me. They wounded me, and I forced that pain into this energy. He'd killed her. He'd taken her from me. That rage poured into the blast as well. The massive amount of anger and energy I was building in my hands was beginning to actually burn my fingers. I had wanted to launch it all back at him. I would destroy him with this. This is for you, Mom, I whispered, and with a shout of fury, I thrust my palms forward and fired it. The pure energy screamed from my hands like a sea of angry lions. The thunder paled in comparison to its power. The red-hot golden energy blast soared like a massive pillar of light that struck the suit of armor right where I'd left the hole. I couldn't hear Richardson scream, but I could tell he was, just from the look of pain and horror on his face as his precious suit was reduced to molten scrap metal. There was a small explosion as the doctor ejected himself from his destroyed weapon. He landed in a heap on the parking lot and struggled to his feet. Damn it, he cried. Damn it, I miscalculated. I need to get out of... Where do you think you're going? I snarled, grabbing him by his collar and yanking him up so I could see the eyes of my mother's murderer. He squeaked like a frightened rat, a fitting animal to compare him to. What the hell? What are you? He screamed. I am the legendary Super Saiyan, I answered forcefully, and the sin you committed, the things you've done, I can never forgive you. I will never forgive you for this. No, please, mercy, have mercy, mercy, I roared, my anger exploding. You expect me to show you mercy? You took my mother from me. I didn't know, I didn't mean to. Please, I beg you, he cried. He was practically bawling like a baby. I raised my hand to finish him. It wouldn't take much. One strike would end this. That's enough, Tomiki. I stopped and looked away towards my left. There, standing on the other end of the parking lot with his arms crossed, was a monstrously tall old man with light blonde hair and a beard. His blue eyes stared at me with a fierce intensity. He didn't fear the power I was showing, but he clearly seemed to respect what I was capable of. He was wearing a kimono-style outfit, and he gave off an air of wisdom and power that made me tremble. I knew his face, for I'd seen him before. Hayato, I muttered. He was the master martial artist that Belle had constantly told me about. The man she wanted to train me to control my urges. Tomiki, you've done well. You made your point here. It's time to put an end to this. I snarled at him and then looked past him. I hadn't noticed before, but a small mob of police cars had rolled up. Officers were watching from their open car doors in awe, none knowing quite what to do or say. I was stunned by the crowd I'd acquired. Put him down, Tomiki. Suddenly I remembered who I was holding, and my rage powered up once more. Do you know what he's done? I snarled. I know, boy. He killed Belle! I roared, my fists clenched for the final blow. He took her from me. He deserves to die! Maybe he does, I replied, but you are no executioner, Tomiki. Watch me be one, I hissed. Tomaki, his voice was soft and yet so forceful. I stopped my attack and blinked. Belle told me a lot about you, you know. About your heritage and about that tale of yours. She told me that you were an aggressive and hard-headed child. That you lived to fight and test yourself. And that's admirable, Tomaki. I didn't say a word. I listened and hung on his voice like it was a lifeline. But she also told me that despite all that rage and aggression, you were no murderer. You were too gentle for that. Belle said that? I whispered. What these men did is horrible. I can't even begin to tell you how my heart hurts for your loss, Tomaki. But ask yourself if this is truly how you plan to avenge her. Is this how she wants to rest in peace? Knowing that lives were taken in her name? I trembled and felt my grip loosen. I certainly can't tell you what to do, Tomaki. But I want you to think long and hard about what this being... But I want you to think long and hard about this before you do. What would Belle say if it were her talking instead of me? I didn't need to answer that question because deep in my heart I knew the truth. Killing. Belle always feared that this was what I would become. A killing machine. I was no different than the monstrous robot I just shattered, and I didn't want it. Belle didn't want it. I can't forgive them, Hayato. I can't! I screamed. I know, Tomaki, Hayato muttered. He should die! I roared, throwing him to the ground. I raised my fist. With a furious roar, I brought my fist down next to his head, missing him by inches. He flinched, looked at my fist, and seeing how close he'd come to being turned into road paint, passed out. But you're right. Belle wouldn't want me to kill him. Not even to avenge her, I cried. I stepped back and turned to my peaceful mother. Tomaki, Hayato spoke up, curious as what I was doing. Freeze! It seemed the police finally found their nerve. But put your hands behind your head and get on your knees! I ignored them and knelt down beside Belle, lifting her up into my arms. Her head leaned into my chest, and I felt my tears rebuild, my golden aura fading ever so slightly as my grief began to outweigh my rage. Oh, we told you to freeze! Shut up! I roared back at them, causing them all to leap back behind their doors. It seemed they were afraid of my Super Saiyan power, as well they should be. But right now, I didn't care about them. I had to take Belle away from here. I had to take my mother away. I don't know how I learned to do it. I don't know when I thought about it or how I figured it out. But I felt my body lift into the air with Belle in my arms, and I began to actually fly away. Away from the battleground. Away from the burning store. Away from the police. Away from Hayato. Away from everything. As I flew away from everything, I looked down at my mother's face, and I wept. I'm sorry, Mom. And that was chapter 4. Hope y'all enjoyed that. Difficult to write, actually. But I had fun with it. And keep in mind, that was written back in 2015. I was not a very good writer yet, so if you think that it sounded weird or lacking, I apologize. I did do my best, I promise. I actually had a picture made of the battle. Hold on, maybe I can pull it up. One second. Because when I was trying to come up with design ideas for Tomaki... there we go. Yep, let me pull up the picture. I have it saved. One second. There we go. Yeah, there it is. So let me save image as. I will share this image. There it is. Good. Open Sesame. This was the image that was made of when Tomaki loses his mother. And when he activates Super Saiyan for the very first time. But yeah, that was a fun story. It sounded like a scene from a K-drama. Okay. I've never watched Itaewon Class. I've never seen that one. But anyway, yep. Anyway, let us move on now. Y'all have asked for Monster Club, so let's pull up Monster Club. Let's see where we left off. Let's see. I think we left off with them heading to the store. Yeah, I think we left off on chapter 13, actually. Alright, so. Raven, tell me you didn't make the characters scream their power moves in later chapters. There are a few moments of that, because I was borrowing inspiration from Dragon Ball Z. Thank you, Toho fan. Alright. Chapter 13. I wrote this April 19th, 2013. Alright, here we go. Abraham walked silently with the others, careful to remember where they were going and starting to wonder how far away they had to go in order to go shopping. Michelle was in the lead, walking briskly and with purpose. Tamil was hanging back slightly. He was smiling and looking around him, though he clearly couldn't see anything. Maybe it was just a memory of his, and he was holding Calypso's hand to make sure that he didn't get lost. Calypso, though walking, was looking at her feet, still a little embarrassed from the incident with Asher earlier. Abraham didn't quite know what to say or who to talk to. Thankfully, Michelle took care of that for him. Abraham, she said loudly, you're a little new to all this, so here's how we do things. When we get to the store, we'll split off into groups. One group will go to the food section and pick up anything food-related. The other group will go to the clothing and toiletries area and pick up anything we need from there. When we've got everything that we need, you're to go and check out at line 16. Only go to 16, you understand? Michelle said sharply. Abraham nodded. Yeah, I got it, but why 16? He asked. Because cashier knows us and don't ask questions, Tamil explained happily. And once you get done checking out, we'll meet in the parking lot outside. Any problems with that? Michelle asked. Abraham looked from Calypso and Tamil and then nodded. Yeah, I got one question. How do we explain Tamil's bandages and Calypso's skin to everyone? Won't that stand out? Michelle paused for a moment and then looked at Calypso and Tamil. Show him, she said. Tamil nodded his head with a smile and straightened up. I am sport athlete from foreign country who get hurt in accident, still recovering, he said in an impressive, straightforward manner. Calypso spoke eloquently with a slight accent herself. And I suffer from methylglobinopathy, and that affects the pigment of my skin, making it a bluish tint. We've been going off of these excuses every time anyone asks us, Calypso said. And that's the story you'll tell if anyone asks you, Michelle said sharply. Think you can handle that? Yeah, sure. Wait, Calypso, what was it called? Methanoglobinamia, she said again. I felt a little relieved. Okay, I can't pronounce that, but I'll just say it's a skin disorder. I can remember that much. Michelle smiled and continued walking down the road with Abraham and the others following. Suddenly, Tamil stopped walking, his smile replaced by a look of nervousness and uncertainty. Michelle and Calypso stopped and looked at him. What's wrong? Calypso asked. Tamil's gaze turned to the woods as if he could sense something in them. Something following us, he said. How can you tell that? Abraham asked. Blind, not stupid, Tamil answered darkly. I hear it following for the last 10 minutes. Do not know what is. Michelle followed Tamil's gaze and looked around the trees. Could it be Asher? Abraham asked. Or maybe Katie and Sarah? Michelle shook her head. No, not a chance. Asher can't leave the house in the sunlight. Plus, Sarah and Katie know better than to follow us. Whatever it is, not a member of the club, Michelle answered. Calypso hugged herself and trembled. I wish Asher were here. He'd take care of it, Calypso whispered. Is that the only reason you want him here? Michelle smirked. Calypso blushed and scowled. Oh, stop it, Michelle, she snapped. As they spoke, Tamil seemed to relax a little. Whatever it was, it's not there now, Tamil said. Michelle relaxed as well and nodded to the group. All right, then we'll keep going, but be cautious. At long last, the group made it down into a bustling suburb where there was a large, well, it looked like something like a Walmart, but it wasn't. It was some kind of grocery store, though, looking more like a local residency area. Michelle indicated it to the team, and they walked to the doors. Before they entered, Michelle stopped the group. Calypso, make sure your ear fins are covered, and Tamil, you stay close to me. She handed the clothing section of the list to Calypso and then turned to Abraham. You're going to go with Calypso to the clothing and toiletry section. I'll take Tamil with me to get food. Why can't Calypso go with you? Abraham asked. Because Calypso only gets seafood and Michelle not know how to buy good food, Tamil laughed. Michelle and Calypso both slapped the back of Tamil's head, causing his hat to fall off as he laughed at them. Abraham laughed too. All the stress and nervousness from earlier was pretty much gone. All right, I guess I'll go with Calypso then, Abraham said. Michelle smiled and patted his shoulder. Good luck, newbie. See you out here when we're done, Michelle said. She then took Tamil's hand and led him into the store. Calypso wandered into the store after him, but then took a left. Abraham followed to the toiletries and clothing section. When they reached the aisles they wanted, Abraham looked at Calypso and nudged her. So, what's on the list? Abraham asked. Calypso pulled up the list and looked at it. Her eyes narrowed and she kept looking at it and staring up at the foreign objects and then looking back at the list. I don't know, she gasped. Huh? I can't understand this writing, Calypso said in a panic. I can't make it out. What's wrong with me? Did Solomon write this in a new language or a code? Am I disoriented? Calm down. Hold on. Let me see it, Abraham said quickly, trying to calm Calypso down. She held out the list for him to see. It took all his effort not to burst out laughing when he saw the list. Calypso, it's upside down, Abraham laughed. Calypso pulled it back up and flipped it over. She then blushed and slapped her hand to her forehead. I'm an idiot, she groaned. Abraham shook his head, trying not to laugh. No offense, but you act like a fish out of water, Abraham chuckled. You're always tripping and stumbling over yourself. Are you okay, or just clumsy? Calypso blushed and looked away, trying to focus on the list. Well, I'm kind of clumsy on 2 feet. I prefer the water, Calypso whispered meekly. It doesn't bother you, does it? She asked. Abraham shook his head. No, it's just funny. Calypso picked up a container of detergent and handed it to Abraham to carry. Well, I feel like it bothers everyone else, Calypso whimpered, especially Ash. Abraham walked beside her as they walked down the aisle. Why do you say that? Abraham asked. Calypso shook her head. I'm always tripping over myself around him, and he must think I'm such a loser, always having to save me, Calypso moaned. I mean, did you see the way he looked at me when I fell on him this morning? I was so embarrassed. I don't think he minded it that much, though, Abraham said, smirking a little. He reached up and grabbed a few bars of soap and looked back at Calypso. Maybe you should ask him about it sometime. Calypso looked down and gave a small smile. I don't know. Maybe just... Can we get back to the list, please? She tried to return her focus to the task at hand. Abraham was still filled with a lot of questions, though, and he knew that Calypso would be the perfect person to talk to. Unlike the others, Calypso wasn't very good at keeping secrets, so all he had to do was ask the right questions, and he might be able to get some real answers from her. Calypso, what's the story with the Dawnbringers? Abraham asked. Calypso stiffened and turned to look at him. Why do you want to know that? Well, if they're dangerous, I think it might be important to know everything I can about them, Abraham said innocently, pretending to be more focused on the shopping than the question. Calypso sighed and looked lost in thought. Well, she muttered, the Dawnbringers are a society of monster hunters. They dedicate themselves to purging the world of all inhuman or supernatural creatures, Calypso explained. Are there a lot of them? Abraham asked. I don't know. I know that there are enough of them to be considered dangerous, Calypso answered darkly. Why haven't they attacked before? Abraham asked. I mean, they managed to capture Katie, so they knew where you lived. No, Calypso said. Katie was kidnapped outside of the house. They wanted to use her to make her show them where our home was. They've never been able to find our home before. The only hunters that know where we live are now dead. Thanks to Asher. I see, Abraham said, trying to process things. So Asher keeps the house safe from them. Before him, all we could do was hide when the Dawnbringers were near. It was our only choice. But then when Asher came, we didn't have to hide anymore, Calypso said, continuing to pull items from the shelves. Does Asher, normally feed on the Dawnbringers he kills? Abraham growled darkly, remembering the night Asher had killed Warren. Calypso shivered and closed her eyes. Asher is... Calypso tried to explain but stopped short. He's what? Abraham pressed. Asher's not a monster, Abraham, she mumbled. Every night Asher has to go out and feed to keep up his strength. It's not because he wants to, it's because he has to. Abraham paused and just watched Calypso, realizing that he might have gone too far. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you, Abraham said. It's all right, she said calmly with a weak smile. Just try not to be too harsh about him, okay? Abraham followed her in silence. She continued to pick up items from the list. And at long last, it seemed that they had collected everything they needed. Do you think the others are done now? Abraham asked. I'm not sure. Let's check out and wait in the parking lot like Michelle said, Calypso replied. Abraham nodded and went to her to aisle 16. There was a young woman waiting. She looked up to see Calypso and suddenly began looking around nervously. Hey, Calypso, she whispered softly. How you doing? She asked. Calypso smiled and put the goods in front of the woman. I'm fine, just a little tired, Calypso said. Michelle and Tamil didn't come by here already, did they? The woman shook her head. You're the only club member here so far. I'll let them know you got here first, though. She looked at Abraham and frowned. And who's he? Oh, he's Abraham. He's new to the club. And don't worry, he's a human, Calypso explained. The women went about checking out the items and nodded at Abraham. Used to these guys yet? She asked. Getting there, Abraham answered, and the woman laughed. Believe me, they're an interesting bunch. I've known them for about 10 months, and I'm still not quite used to them. The name's Abby, by the way, she answered. When she was done checking everything out, she looked at Calypso. Okay, so who's paying? Michelle has the money. You'll have to wait for her, Calypso said. Abby nodded. All right, then I suggest taking your stuff and heading out. I'll let Michelle know that you came by. Calypso laughed, and then they hurried out. With that, Abraham and Calypso picked up their bags and walked down to the parking lot. The sun blinded them for a moment, but they kept on walking. Suddenly, Calypso stopped. Abraham, something is wrong. What do you mean? He asked. I can't place it. I feel like... excuse me. Abraham and Calypso spun around to see a middle-aged man running up to them. He looked rather fat and out of breath. He was balding and had on glasses. I'm sorry for bothering you, but I'm wondering if you could help me. I'm late for a meeting, and I was wondering if you know how to get to Ridgecrest Lane. Abraham smiled. Yeah, I think it's 3 blocks in that direction, he said kindly. The man smiled and held up his hand. Oh, really? Thank you. I got turned around. Also, you should probably know, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small water pistol, that you're about to get wet. He squirted Calypso with the water pistol, and she suddenly squealed as her legs fell out from underneath her. Or rather, they had vanished from under her, her legs quickly melding together and transforming into a long mermaid's tail as she fell to the ground in a heap. She couldn't stand. The grocery bags in her hand clattered to the ground as she had dropped them when she fell. Abraham stared in shock. What the hell? Abraham grabbed. Mermaids are forced to return to their original form when in the presence of water, the man said sternly, losing all of his warmth and kindness from earlier. No, Abraham, he's one of them, Calypso cried, quickly trying to crawl away from him. The stranger only grinned fiercely. He's a Dawnbringer. You're free to go, human. My business is with the mermaid. Abraham looked around and saw that there was no one else nearby to see her, but he couldn't risk anyone seeing Calypso like this. He ripped off his jacket and threw it over her lower half, covering her tail. The Dawnbringer agent stared at him with a frown. I said leave, boy. I can't, Abraham stuttered. I can't do that, the Dawnbringer sighed. Very well, then you'll die with her. When you two have been dealt with, the two in the store die next. It was you, Abraham cried. You're the one that Tamil detected following us in the woods earlier. The name's Gregory, an agent of the Dawnbringer organization. We couldn't ignore your little club any longer after Warren and his partner went missing. Warren was killed by a vampire, Abraham said, and he'll kill you too if you don't leave. Gregory just laughed. Why do you think I chose to attack you in broad daylight in the middle of a public location? Your pet vampires are here to save you, and I'm going to make sure you die before it gets dark. Abraham felt his heart fall as he realized the truth of these words. It was all true. Asher wasn't here now, and he had no way to protect Calypso or the others when they came out. Gregory pulled a very real pistol out of his jacket and cocked it. Any final words? And that was chapter 13. Moving on. Chapter 14. Need to refill my drink in a second. All right. Chapter 14, written May 13th, 2013. Let them go! Abraham spun to look behind Gregory's gun. Behind him was a furious and dangerous-looking Michelle. Her eyes flared with an intense anger and her fists were clenched. Behind her was Tamil, who looked slightly confused. He couldn't see what was in front of him, but he knew what was going on. He was still holding the groceries in his hands, and there was much to be worried about from as far as Abraham could see. He dared not move as the hunter Gregory turned to face Michelle. So the werewolf rears her head, and the mummy. I said let them go, you bastard, Michelle snarled. She made a dangerous move towards him, but Gregory made a threatening motion with the gun back towards Calypso. You're in no position to make threats, werewolf, he mocked. Michelle growled dangerously. What do you want? Michelle asked him dangerously. Purity, Gregory snapped. You and your kind have been polluting this earth like a plague, and the Dawnbringers will not rest until all of you have been erased from this world, and we can finally be free of your filth. As he spoke, I noticed that his gun was slightly lowered. He wasn't focusing on me. I slowly began to move towards his gun arm. You touch her and You'll what, werewolf? Gregory barked. You have no full moon to aid you and your pet vampires locked inside to keep from burning to ash. You have a beached mermaid and a mummy who can't see. I, on the other hand, have 3 members of the Cursed Club in front of me and a gun. Abraham was getting so close. Abraham reached out his hand cautiously to grab at the pistol. Tell me, werewolf, what have I to fear from the likes of you? Abraham leapt forward immediately and grabbed the gun. With a jerk, Abraham yanked at the pistol, trying to rip it away from Gregory's hands. He pulled back, and slowly remembered that Abraham was a threat too. They struggled as Abraham fought to get the gun out of Gregory's hand. Michelle dashed across to the lot to the 2 of them. Hold on, Abraham, she screamed. She ran forward and swung at Gregory. He ducked the hit and kicked her in the abdomen, then kneed Abraham in the stomach. Abraham let out a grunt and stumbled as he pulled the pistol away from him. That was brave, boy, but very stupid. Abraham didn't scream or cry out as he felt a powerful and shocking feeling flash through his side. It felt as if a bolt of lightning had torn through his side and exploded in his stomach. It stung like fire, and then there was this cold and horribly sick sensation running through his very blood as he felt the object tear through his skin and flesh. He fell over and clutched his side in agony, too shocked and stunned to cry out. The world seemed to flash different colors as he could hear the sound of Michelle screaming furiously and Calypso shrieking. There was a small trickle of blood from his side, but he could feel his torn shirt. I missed you deliberately, boy, because you're not my enemy. Oppose me again, and I will be sure the next shot is fatal. He turned and pointed the gun to Michelle. Now where were I? There was a sudden swooshing sound as Calypso's hands grabbed the ground and she spun her body across the rock and dirt. As she swung across the ground and struck Gregory's leg with her tail, knocking him off his feet and sending him sprawling to the ground. With a grunt and a cough, Gregory hit the earth face first. Abraham could only watch from where he sat. Michelle let out a roar of rage and leapt on Gregory, kicking the gun away from him and pounding him with her fists. Despite being a head smaller than him, she showed impressive strength with each swing of her fists, crashing into Gregory's skull. Abraham, oh my God, are you okay? Calypso cried as she crawled over to Abraham, looking at him with concern. Was he okay? Abraham couldn't tell yet. He was breathing, but why? Hadn't he been shot? I think so. Calypso laid herself next to his side and began to inspect the bleeding. Looks like it grazed you, thank God, she whispered. Abraham was only half paying attention to her, though. He was lost in his own thoughts. Here he was being looked after by Calypso, after being saved by her. Here he was, an untrained and weak human being, laying with a wound in his side as Michelle viciously pounded the hunter into the ground. What did he have to offer? Asher was so powerful, and Michelle was incredible too. Even Calypso, who was beached and unable to stand, could put up more of a fight than he did. What good was he? Tears welled up in his eyes as he thought of how his own mortality and his own pathetic status in comparison to what was plain perfection next to him. Oh, I'm sorry, am I hurting you? Calypso asked in surprise, noticing his tears. She was bandaging his side as she spoke. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to stop the bleeding. No, it's fine, Abraham muttered. There was a sound of a yelp as Michelle climbed to her feet and kicked the unconscious hunter in the mouth. I should kill you, but I'd much rather let you explain yourself to the authorities. She stood up and kicked the gun back over to his hand. She walked over and threw her coat over Calypso's tail. Dry yourself off, now! She then sat down by Abraham as Calypso got to work. Tennille, come here, quick! Are you all right? I'm fine, Michelle, Abraham protested. And after a quick analysis, Abraham could tell that he was okay. The wound was a graze, but the real injury had been his pride. Michelle nodded and stood up as Tennille came closer. Tennille and I are going to... We got to get back to the house. We got to inform Solomon about what's happened here. He needs to know, Calypso. He needs to know. And Calypso, you stay with Abraham and make sure he gets back safe. Abraham shook his head. No, I can move. I can go. Abraham tried to speak up, but Michelle shot him a look that clearly told him she wasn't interested in his protests. Sorry, Abraham, but this is my call. She turned to Tamil and put her hand on his shoulder. Let's move. Michelle took off down the street with Tamil holding onto her shoulder. He ran after her and managed to stay close to her side. Calypso continued to dry off her tail, and Abraham could see it slowly converting back to a pair of legs. Abraham, I'm sorry that you got mixed up in this, Calypso whimpered. Abraham stared at her and closed his eyes in defeat. I'm sorry, I couldn't do anything to stop him, Abraham admitted. Calypso looked back at him. What are you talking about? You were trying to save us. But I didn't. But you were amazing. Well, I thought he'd hurt you bad or worse. I guess maybe I lost my temper. It was nothing, Calypso laughed. Yeah, well, why can't I be like that? Calypso finally finished drying herself off, and she stood up on her own two legs again. She leaned down and held her hand out to Abraham. Let's go, please. Abraham reached up and took her hand. She pulled him to his feet, and he stood up. His legs suddenly felt so weak. His knees buckled. It was as if the gunshot had taken all the energy out of him. Hold on, Calypso cried, holding his arm so that Abraham didn't fall. I'm okay. I'm fine, Abraham insisted, trying to regain his balance. No, you're not. You're still rattled, Calypso answered. There was force in her voice, which sounded so odd to Abraham. Normally, Calypso stumbled over her words and stuttered out of nerves, but now she was stern and concerned. You need to move slowly. She kept her hand on his shoulder and walked beside him slowly towards the street. Where are we going? Abraham asked. We're heading back home. You need to see Asher. Abraham suddenly felt a cold sweat come over him. Asher? Why do I need to see Asher? He asked. Your wound may be infected. He can clean it, she said in frustration. Why not just put alcohol or something on it? Abraham said in a fright. The thought of Asher having to help him scared him considerably. We never buy the stuff because it'd be a waste of money. Asher's saliva is a natural catalyst and blood cleaning agent. If anyone ever gets infected, cuts, or scraped, we take it to him. Now, let's go, please. The police will be here soon. Abraham tried to argue, but the force in Calypso's voice was shocking, so he found himself tailing her despite his wishes. He shot a glance back at the unconscious and beaten Gregory. What about him? Abraham asked. The authorities can take care of him. Now come on. She pulled harder on his arm until at last Abraham tore his eyes away and obediently followed her down the street. The walk home was long and quiet. Calypso didn't say a word, and whenever Abraham tried to speak, she would shush him, saying that he needed to keep quiet until they got home. The street eventually gave way to trees, and soon they found themselves walking through the forest again. The sky was growing dark, and the moon was starting to rise, glowing in the distance beautifully. It was a crescent moon, and the sight of it reminded him of only a few weeks ago when it had been full, and Michelle had gone on her rampage. The power he had seen that night from Michelle and Asher had been so devastating. What good was he? What could he offer the club when he had no power already? I'm sorry, Calypso, Abraham whispered. What for? Calypso asked. The sound of frogs and crickets announced they were closed into the lake. For making you go through this. Abraham, you were trying to protect us, Calypso said with a smile. Yeah, my mistake was thinking I was strong enough to do that. I'm weak. I'm not like Asher or Michelle, Abraham grimaced. He suddenly felt a sharp pain in his side and had to stop. Calypso gasped and lifted his jacket to look at the wound. Oh no, it's deeper than I thought. Come on, we'll go to the docks. I'll clean it off some. She walked Abraham down to a nearby dock and helped him down to sit by the wooden plank near the water. She lifted his jacket and made to clean off the area where he'd been hurt. It might be infected. We need Asher right now, but I don't want to move you as you are. Abraham just looked off at the lake, clutching his side, feeling a little bit of blood trickle down. Yeah, I screwed up, huh? You stop that, Calypso snapped. Abraham looked up at her to see her eyes were fixed, and now she looked rather pissed. You're not weak. No, you're not like Asher or Michelle, but you're not a weakling. You tried to fight for the club, and that makes you strong. Abraham sighed and tried to sit up. And getting shot like this, getting my butt kicked when I had the advantage. Well, we have our moments, even Asher. I mean, you should have seen him when I first met him. Abraham looked up in shock and stared at Calypso. Asher was weak? Yeah, I had to save him that night, actually. The night we met. Calypso stared off at the lake and smiled. I'll never forget it. What happened? Abraham asked. Calypso blushed. Well, it was about a year ago, maybe a little longer. But I was out here by the lake. I was just out here by myself. And when Asher showed up, he... Come on, Calypso. The kid's suffering enough already without having to know that story. Abraham and Calypso both whirled around to see a dark figure standing by the dock. Asher stood grinning, the moonlight flashing across his fangs. Calypso let out a frightened squeak and blushed terrifically, and without a moment's thought she dove into the water where her feet instantly turned back into a long and beautiful mermaid's tail. She splashed into the water and dove out of sight, her embarrassed expression still fresh on Abraham's mind. And Asher let out a small laugh. I didn't mean to scare her. I'll apologize later. Abraham suddenly realized that he was now alone with Asher on the docks, the very last person he wanted to be near. Michelle told me that you got hurt by a hunter's bullet. I came to see the damage. He knelt down by Abraham, who quickly tensed up and tried to move away. Asher caught this movement and then sighed sadly. Yeah, I see, he muttered. Well, I can't really say I blame you. I'd be scared too. Abraham flushed and looked down. I'm sorry, No, I understand. Asher then turned to look at Abraham. But with that said, I do need to see the wound. Abraham hesitated for a moment and then finally lifted up his jacket to show the cut. Asher's eyes flashed red for a moment at the sight of the blood, but then he shook it off. It's a minor injury, but yeah, it looks like it might be infected. Better safe than sorry. Hold still. Asher raised two of his fingers to his mouth and proceeded to lick them carefully. He then held his hand down and ran his fingers along the cut. Abraham felt a sudden burst of ecstasy through him from the cut. His body felt limp and he felt weak. Ah! Abraham moaned. Sorry. Vampire saliva has that effect, he explained. It'll pass, though. He finished, running his hand along the cut and sat down on the dock. I'd stay still while the spit does its work. Abraham nodded weakly and just stared out at the lake with Asher. Asher? Abraham asked. Yeah? What was that story that Calypso was going to tell me? Asher let out a small laugh. Oh, she was going to tell you about the night I met her and the day I joined the club, Asher explained. Well, I'd still kind of like to know it, Abraham pressed. Asher turned and looked at him with a smirk. You really want to know the story? Asher asked. Abraham gave a small nod and Asher shrugged. All right. I mean, if you really want to know, it can't hurt. He suddenly paused and looked at Abraham calmly with a sad look. So, Abraham, the thing you need to understand is that before I joined the club, I was a real monster. I fed to survive, and quite often. I had trouble controlling that hunger. Abraham gulped a little but didn't say anything. The night I joined the club, it was a little over a year ago now. I think the night was a lot like this one. All right, and that is chapter 14. Should we move on to chapter 15, or do we go to the Raptors now? Y'all's call. Oh, I forgot. I should probably show you the image for that story, too. One moment. Alright, let me see. There was a particular image drawn for that scene when Calypso jumps into the water. There it is. I knew it was here. Yeah, I'll go ahead and say it. Mika drew the image. This was a Mika original. How much time do we have left? About 30 minutes. All right, so we got to vote for 15. We got one vote for 15, if anyone else wants to vote. All right, we got to vote for Raptors, so that's 2. 2 votes. So what do they do with the hunter? They left him because he fired a shot in the middle of a parking lot, and that means the authorities will be called, and now he has to explain why he was firing a gun in a parking lot, and they'd call him crazy if he said it was a bunch of monsters. All right, we've got to vote for next chapter. Now, all right, we'll read the next Monster Club chapter. But that means that we're probably only going to do one Raptor chapter tonight. All right, chapter 15. This is another flashback chapter. This is called Asher's Memory. Sorry, I had to get some water in it. Okay. Here we go. Asher's Memory. Written May 17th, 2013. I hungered. My body was on fire with it. I staggered through the cursed forest, searching, sniffing, and growling. I hadn't eaten in so long I couldn't afford to. Every day was a battle with myself. I couldn't become a monster. I was myself. I was Asher. I wasn't a beast. I needed to control myself. I had to, and yet it was a hopeless struggle. I felt the rage within, the thirst. Suddenly I perked up. I smelled it. The smell of fresh blood, the smell of a human. My eyes darted from left to right, scanning for that smell. I could see him, 300 yards away. There was something laying in front of him, but the man was closer, and his smell was so delicious. I felt my hunger take hold of my senses. I gave in to madness and hunger as logic fled my mind. I drove through the undergrowth with full speed, the world flying past me as the shadows of the night coated my body in their unholy shroud. My eyes blazed with an insane fury, and I felt my thirst drive me like an animal built on carnage. I was not a being of nature. I was a shadow, a creature spawned and fed by darkness. I was a beast of the night, a human no more. I was a vampire. Blood was what I desired, and death was my method. I would kill. I would feed. Thus I feed, and therefore I live. I live, but forever alone. I threw myself through the forest silently, stalking the man. He had a bow in his hand and an arrow prepped to fire at the other figure. My body faded into the shadows and moved as silently and fluidly as a stream of water, until I materialized behind my prey. The meal mentioned something, a threat perhaps, but it mattered little. I was upon him in moments. I hunger. With a swift movement, I clutched his head in my shadowy hand and yanked him up from his kneeling position and snarled into shouts and bellows for help. I thirst. I ripped his shirt back, exposing his neck. But I saw through the flesh to what lay within, the pulsing red nectar. The beating of his heart was intoxicating as it quickened, and the feel of his blood was already too much to resist. I wasted no time and plunged my fangs deep into his neck. I couldn't even scream as his blood erupted in a gush of red that filled my mouth and neck, which the shadows quickly consumed, feeding me more. I didn't let go of his body, clinging to it with my unhinged jaws and draining every last drop of his precious blood. It was life pouring into my mouth, and I craved it. He made a weak, gurgling sound and began to go pale as a sheet, the blood leaving him and flowing into myself. I felt relief wash over me as the blood flowed through me and filled me. His body went limp at last, and his heart had nothing more to pump. I felt his shell collapse as I swallowed the last of his blood and bits of his flesh. The shadows had become my body, consumed all that was left of his blood, so there was nothing left to even find him. Oh my God. At the sound of the voice, I spun, remembering the other being nearby. I glared at the figure when my eyes finally adjusted and saw her for what she was. I froze. The moonlight cast its elegant glow across her beautiful and sleek body. She was a mermaid with long, flowing bluish-silver hair and gorgeous features. The scales of her tail reflected the light of the moon, and it seemed to practically glow before my eyes. Her penetrating blue eyes were as deep and as lovely as the ocean itself. Every part of her captured my attention, and my body felt weak just at the sight of her. Deep within my mind, I felt the beast retreat back from her gaze, ashamed of what she was looking upon. I was ashamed, embarrassed, and simply horrified at the thought of standing before such beauty. What was I to her? I was a monster, a freak. We stared at each other, beauty looking upon the beast. I felt tears start to come to my eyes, and I quickly fled from her, back into the embrace of the darkness. It was darkness that I thrived within. I didn't deserve to be gazed upon by such brilliance. I hid within the shadows as I felt the blood rage pass. My body resumed its mortal appearance, and the shadows sank from me. I cowered behind a nearby tree and watched her shamelessly. I couldn't see me. She couldn't see me. She must have thought I'd left. I stayed there for a long time, praying that I could forget her, that I could put it all behind me, but I just couldn't. That look on her face when she saw me, and what I had done, it was too much to bear. After a moment, I dared to look and see her again. She wasn't there. She must have run off. I looked at the ground where she had lay and saw dainty footprints. I knew that I should probably forget her and go. I didn't belong with anyone. I was alone. I was a vampire and a monstrosity. Where did I belong if not in the night? But something kept drawing me towards her like a siren song. I wanted to know more about her, the thing of beauty that I had never seen before. I resisted all logic and reason, and I decided to follow her. I took the form of a bat and took to the sky. As a bat, I'm much smaller and much more vulnerable, but it allowed me to move quickly and undetected. I darted quickly across the trees, following her scent. I could practically see her image in my mind, her face, that beautiful body. The thought itself made me fidgety. Soon I was looking upon a house that I had never seen before. The scent led me to that building. I flapped my wings slowly, debating my next move. This was my chance to leave her behind forever, to go back to the night and abandon her. It would have been a smarter choice, really. What good could I be to her or her kind? But the thought of leaving her was so depressing that it made me want to cry. But why? I'd never grown so attached to something before. I looked, and there was an open window. I made up my mind and flew into it, and within moments, I was inside the house. Ah! What the hell? I was stuck. I couldn't move. Something had snared me out of thin air and was holding on to me, keeping me from even flapping my wings. I tried to fight and struggle, but no matter what I did, the invisible force held me. I looked around and saw that the invisible force was spider webbing. I was surrounded by webs. What kind of room was this? Oh, look, a little bat. My eyes darted to the side of the room to see a young woman by the door, but she wasn't normal. While most women have 2 legs, this one had 8, and all were spider legs. This was a drider. I'd read about them, but I'd never seen one. I felt a great deal of fear wash over me at the thought of what she might do to me. I trembled and tried to fight the webs again. Oh, no, don't struggle, little guy, she urged. You'll only hurt yourself. Here, I'll go get Calypso. She'll know what to do with you. She quickly scurried out of the room, and I was left alone in the webs again. I thought about returning to my normal form, but to do that while trapped in these webs would be a death sentence. I'd be just as trapped, and she'd see me for what I was. I had to keep playing the innocent victim. He's right here. I looked to see the drider running back in with someone. It was her. She didn't have her fins this time, but she was just as gorgeous as I remember. She looked up at me and smiled. Aw, poor little guy. Sarah, cut him down. I'll take care of it. I felt my body shake as she spoke. Her voice was just as lovely as she was. The dritter walked to the web and cut it with her finger, allowing me to fall into the hands of the mermaid. There, that's better, isn't it? I stared up at her, feeling my whole body trembling and shivering. Are you okay? You're shaking. She reached her soft fingers behind my head and began to rub it gently. I couldn't contain myself anymore. Within seconds, I dropped out of her hands onto the floor and resumed my normal form. Sarah let out a shriek, and I could only look up shamefully at the mermaid. Please, I'm sorry. I tried to find the right words to say. Should I apologize for what she saw in the forest? Should I tell her my name? Should I say thanks for saving me from the webs? I just didn't know. All she would do is stare at me in the mixture of shock and awe. What's going on? Another girl ran into the room. She had piercing blue eyes like a dog, and she had a feral look like an animal. I heard screaming and... She saw me, and she gave me a vicious look. Who the hell are you? She didn't wait for my answer. With a swift movement, she grabbed me and threw me out of the dritter's room and into the hallway. She jumped on top of me and raised her fist. Instinct kicked in, and I snarled back at her. I grabbed her fist before it struck and threw her off me into the nearby wall. I jumped to my feet, ready to fight, and the girl seemed ready for the same. Stop! The mermaid screamed, running between me and my opponent. She turned to my attacker. Michelle, don't hurt him. He saved my life. There was a moment of silence as those words sank in. Saved your life? Michelle gasped. Calypso, that thing is a vampire. He was probably saving you for dinner. Calypso nodded, but then turned to look at me with those beautiful eyes, and she was blushing. Maybe, but I don't know. He seems more like a lost little bat to me. I blushed heavily and looked down. I'm sorry for scaring you. If you want me to leave, I'll leave if you want. I don't think that's a good idea, Calypso said. No, it's better this way, I said, consigning myself to the night. No, I'm afraid she's right. I turned to the sound of the new voice and saw an old man walking up the stairs. He had a small beard and a smile on his face, and I could also see right through him. The sun will be coming up soon, and if you don't have shelter, then you won't last. Why not stay here until it goes down again? What is it with you, Solomon? Michelle barked. How can you just trust him so easily? Because, Michelle, he's no different from anyone else here. Sorry. Got something in my throat. 1 second. Sorry about that. Because, Michelle, he's no different from anyone else here. A lost and misunderstood boy. Solomon winked at me, and I felt a sudden chill. How could he know me so well? What else did this ghost know? Michelle paused at his words and fidgeted. Well, fine, but if he tries anything, I'm staking him myself, Michelle said roughly, although I detected more humor in her words than anger. A part of me wanted to decline the offer, but then my eyes fell upon the mermaid, who they called Calypso, and I felt myself respond without meaning to. Thank you. I'd love to stay, I whispered. The blush on my face did not compare to the happiness and the anxiousness that filled my lonely heart. And that was chapter 15. And yes, as before, this too got a comic. I believe that Mika drew a comic for each of the backstories. Let me see if I can find it. Well, no, she didn't draw one for all of them because we stopped talking to her after a certain point. But let me see if I can find Asher's, and then I'll move on to the Raptor Girls. Where, oh where is Asher's page? Not there. Let me try another spot. I know it's here. 1 second. Nope. Okay. One last spot to look. One last spot to look. There it is. Found it. Okay, and now pull up. Decrease size. A little more. There we go. Now you can see it. Yeah, that was Mika's comic for the scene. I'll leave it up there for a second while I pull up the Raptors. There it is. Okay. And I believe we left off... Yeah, we finished up Charlie's thing. We finished up Charlie, so now we're on part 11. Wow, we're almost done with this too. I think we only got 4 chapters of this to go. Alright, let's pull this down. Alright, let's go into the last reading of the night. Everyday Life with Raptors, part 11, written March 21st, 2020. Let's do it. At the camp, Echo was sitting by the lake, looking out over the still water. There was a mist rolling over the mountains and settling itself over everything. It was gorgeous, like something out of a dream. She swished her tail along the grass and smiled softly, imagining Blue and Charlie back here, and Delta too. They could all sit here together and laugh while they watched the mist drift along, and the sound of birds chirping could sound them to sleep. But could that ever happen again? Echo frowned as she thought of that chilling statement to herself. Her mind drifted back to the island, the place they were born and where they'd lived before meeting Alpha. There were no pretty views like this on the island base. There were no birds chirping. In fact, the more she thought about it, Echo didn't remember much of what the outside of the base even looked like. She remembered stuffy rooms and large running spaces with little to see or look at. She remembered observation windows on all sides where men in military uniforms and lab coats watched her and her sisters while bickering. She'd remembered a time she'd wanted their approval, wanted to prove something to them. She thought back to those days with no small degree of contempt as her hand gently ran along the scar on her face. "Who says you get to be our alpha?" she mocked Blue. "Just 'cause you're the oldest, you get to be in charge? I'm every bit as tough and as knowledgeable as you." Charlie had been hiding behind Blue then. They were still young. Charlie being the youngest. She hadn't wanted to make a scene, and she hated being watched. She often stayed close to Blue or Delta. Delta had just smirked as she watched. She knew Echo wasn't fit to be leader, but she thrived on the competition. Always one for a bit of action. Perhaps the thought of a little sibling rivalry would shake up the mundane for her. But Blue hadn't budged. "If I thought those things were all it took to be leader, I wouldn't care about handing over leadership. But they aren't all that matter," Blue had said. "What else does?" Echo asked. "Patience, humility, wisdom." "There you go again," Echo laughed, "holding yourself over us with your self-righteous bullshit." "Echo, stop it. Blue's a good leader," Charlie had whimpered, not wanting to see her sisters fight. "Yeah, she is. But we need a better one." Echo took a step forward, flashing her foot claw. Now Charlie was scared and quickly stumbling away. Delta backed up too, but didn't take her eyes off of them. "Let's see if you can fight your way to the top, Blue." "Don't do it, Echo. Don't tell me what to do. I'm the new leader." Echo remembered it all. The vicious attack she made on Blue. The ferocious strike at the hip, which Blue had evaded. How Blue had not thrown the first strike, but kept dodging and weaving out of her way. It made Echo furious. It was ridiculous. "Fight back, Blue," she thought. "Show me you deserve to be leader more than I do. Do something with your useless hide. We all wanted off that island, so why not prove you could be the one to take us there? If you wouldn't help us off," she had said it to herself, "if you wouldn't help us, then I'll take the lead and leave you here to rot." But it was her own arrogance that did her in. The last thing she remembered about the fight was her making a flying kick at Blue. Blue pivoted to the dodge and brought up her leg in a roundhouse kick, which struck Echo across the face with the claw of her foot. Echo had met it with the full force of her momentum and was knocked back several feet. Her face practically ripped open. Charlie had screamed. Delta had run to her side, and Blue, she stood stiff as a log, unable to believe what had just happened. And as for her, as for Echo, she faded out of consciousness. The stitches took weeks to finish healing, and the scar would never fully heal. Every day she looked at that scar, and it broke her internally. It was a reminder that Blue had given her, even if not intentionally, that you're not fit to lead us. She'd taken that message to heart and soul, and it broke every ounce of confidence that she had. She didn't resent Blue. She loved Blue with all of her heart, and she followed her willingly as her leader from then on. But nothing would ever bring back her old fire, her old confidence. Delta had tried to spar with her to bring it out, but it didn't work. Charlie had tried playing with her and cuddling close at night to make Echo feel better, but it never made a difference. She was broken. The old, strong, confident Echo was gone. Was it a bad thing, though? She wasn't entirely sure. "Hey, you okay there?" Echo spun around in surprise to see a tall young man standing on the hill. He had brown hair and deep brown eyes. A full beard covered his chin and sides of his face, making him resemble something like a lion of a man. But he had a handsome smile, and he didn't look especially dangerous. He reminded her a little of Alpha. "Sorry, it didn't mean to startle you. Name's Baloo." "Baloo?" Echo asked. "Yeah, it's my staffer nickname, but if you want to know my real name, it's Garth. Just don't tell the kids." Echo blinked a few times, amazed this person would be so open to talking to her. "If I'm interrupting anything..." No, I was just thinking." "The lake is a fine place to do that," he agreed. "But you know, the campers are done with lunch and the staff has plenty of leftovers, and Honcho wanted to know if you and your sister would like to, have some." Echo didn't answer at first, and Garth walked closer, sitting down beside her. "Well, judging from the look in your eye, I guess you're not that hungry." "I'd like to, but I don't want to impose," Echo replied shyly, trying to cover her face. She didn't want him staring at her scar. Garth laughed and shook his head. "There ain't no imposing round here. You and your sister are guests, right?" When she didn't answer, he shrugged and grunted. "Well, in that case, I might as well go for a swim." He stood up and took off his shirt, and Echo glanced at him. And the first thing she saw as his shirt came off made her gasp in horror. 3 long scars ran from his hip to his left bicep. They were long, ugly, and dark red. One looked massively torn up and rigid, and she quickly looked away. Garth paused and flushed a bit. Oh, right. You've never seen these before. It's why I got my nickname. This right here I got on my first year as a staffer, he explained. What happened? Echo asked. Garth laughed and threw his shirt down, shaking his head. Everyone always asks. All right. Guess you can hear the story, too. He stood in front of Echo and started speaking loudly and clearly. He obviously had become used to telling this story. So when you're a first-year staffer, you have to go on a hike for 3 days with your other first-year staff and honcho. We hike out into the mountains, see, and we camp among the wildlife. We share stories, we get our nicknames, all that fun stuff. Well, on our second night, it's raining real hard, and I see a cave up ahead, and I say we should camp out inside. Why set up a tent in the rain when a dry cave will do just fine? Well, Honcho says we shouldn't because bears live in caves, and bears, well, they're crazy. Echo giggled, and Garth continued. Right, so I'm too full of myself to listen. I was excited, I was arrogant, maybe even a little stubborn, and I got up to investigate the cave, see. And sure enough, I take 3 steps inside when a huge old black bear suddenly roars at me. I scream and I start to run, and when that beast takes a swing at me and cuts me wide open, he pointed to his scars, I fell down the hill a bloody effing mess. Honcho had to run over and shoot at the bear to scare it off, and as for me, it looked really bad. Well, what'd they do? Echo asked. Well, I faded in and out of consciousness a few times, but I remember they carried me as far back to camp as they could and called for a rescue chopper. Soon I was being hauled out of the woods by a bunch of medics and carried off to a hospital. That's horrifying, Echo cried. I don't know what to even say to that. Are you really okay now? I wasn't for the first week or 2. I could barely walk or move. I was bedridden for a while, and worse was the wound got infected, so I got sick for a while, too. It was really something awful. Garth sighed. Echo sighed long and low and curled up on the grass. I got my scar in a fight with my sister, she admitted. I was arrogant too, I guess. Garth nodded. I kind of guessed that might be the case. And how could you guess that? Echo asked. I don't know, just sort of the way you carry yourself. You look like someone who was on top of the world and got knocked off, he explained. Well, you don't, Echo growled darkly, feeling a little insulted. What's your excuse for not being timid and miserable like me? You were on top of the world, too. Me? I guess I don't have time to be miserable, he laughed. These scars on my gut are just a reminder of the fact that I ate myself a slice of humble pie and lived to tell about it. And not everyone's that lucky. But you're mutilated. You're scarred for life. Just a reminder not to be an arrogant idiot, he laughed. You know what? Sometimes I think I'm glad I have these. For one thing, they're a fun story to tell, and for another, a lot of people are arrogant or full of themselves these days, and they have to work hard to remember to be humble. Me? I've got 3 nice big reminders I can look at every day I take a shower. Saves me a lot of trouble. Echo just laughed to herself and shook her head. I never thought of it that way. I always saw this as, well, a reason to be ashamed. Oh, sure, I feel ashamed of what I did back then, but I'm also proud of myself for getting over it. Garth beamed proudly and then walked to the water. Anyway, I'll let you decide if you're hungry or not. The mess hall is back that way. He pointed back to the road towards the center of camp. Echo smiled as she watched Garth dive into the freezing cold water and then ran a finger along the scar on her face and flushed. Proud of it, huh? She whispered. Could I be proud of this? Would Alpha be proud of me if I got over it? She asked. From the edge of the forest, Delta watched Echo get up from where she sat and walk to the mess hall. When she'd seen that counselor guy walk over to talk to her, she'd stuck around to see if anything happened. Nothing seemed to be wrong, and she hadn't heard what was said, but the smile on Echo's face told her she had nothing to worry about. What was it they'd talked about, I wonder? At the courtroom, miles and miles away, Owen Grady was finally being called to the stand. The courtroom was silent as he approached the bench and sat down. Blue and Charlie both sat stiff as they watched their Alpha prepare to be interrogated. He told them not to say or do anything during this, not to move a muscle if they could help it. As Hammond had said, his testimony would be critical. The prosecutor walked up and smiled politely, but with as much civility and kindness as a pit viper. Lieutenant Grady, do you know why you're here today? The prosecutor asked. To judge whether or not the Raptors could be considered sentient and responsible for their own actions, that they aren't just tools or weapons. And you think they are sentient? I've lived with them and trained with them for quite some time now. I can tell you honestly they're perfectly sentient, Owen answered. Why do you think this? Because they can think for themselves. Sure, they can be stubborn and hard-headed, and there are times they won't do what I tell them to do. They have their own interests and dislikes like any normal person would, Owen replied. Certainly, so they make decisions for themselves, but what about for you? He asked. Objection, the witness is not on trial, Hammond called. Lieutenant Grady is the Raptor's handler. He bears a degree of responsibility for these events, the prosecutor replied. I'll allow it, the judge replied with a nod. I'll re-ask the question. The girls can make decisions for themselves. What about you, Lieutenant Grady? I don't think I understand what you're asking, Owen answered honestly. What's the relationship between you and the girls? He asked. Relationship? It's like you said. I'm their handler, Owen laughed. Anything more? Owen paused a moment, taking in the question. Now he understood. Now he realized what angle this was going. He stiffened and his eyes shot to Blue and Charlie, both now curious to what he said. Owen was trapped, and he knew it. His eyes spun to Hoskins in the back of the room, smirking to himself. This was his doing too, wasn't it? If he answered that they were nothing more than his squad that he handled, the girl's faith would be shaken, and it would ruin the years of hard work he'd done with them. But if he said it was more complicated than that, said that they were more to him than just his agents that he worked with, then his ability to be objective and professional would be called into question publicly, and they might be removed from his care. There was no way out of this. No way out of this trap. If he said they were nothing more than just his co-workers, his subordinates, and the girls lost faith. But if he said that they were more, then he wouldn't be qualified to handle them. God damn you, Owen hissed. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Could you speak up? The prosecutor asked. Answer the question, Lieutenant Grady, the judge ordered. I'll ask you one more time, Lieutenant. What is the relationship between you and those Raptor girls? And that was chapter 11. Tell you what, y'all been really cool tonight, and I've been having some fun, so if you guys would like, I will read you chapter 12. Just because I'm a nice guy. But I need to get me some more to drink. Because I'm sucking on ice right now. Yep, that's nothing. I'm gonna get some more to drink. I'll be right back. Y'all decide if you want to hear part 12. Ooh. I'm back. Woo! All right, one more. Let's do it. I'm up for it. Let's go. Everyday Life with Raptors, Part 12, written May 11th, 2020. Here we go. Do I need to repeat the question? The prosecutor asked. He didn't need to repeat it. Owen had heard it very clearly, and he wished he hadn't. This trap was far more clever than he'd anticipated, and he was struggling to find a way out of it. The room felt like it was closing in as the ghosts of both outcomes kept haunting his shoulders, daring him to choose their side, daring him to misplay his hand. There was nothing he could do. He had to answer honestly, and the truth would do anything but set him free. I am the handler of the Raptor Squad, Owen answered. Are you more than that? If you mean if I'm romantically involved, then no, I'm not. That would be a breach of our professional relationship, Owen answered. His eyes darted to Blue and Charlie, who were both sitting stiff and rigid, neither moving or responding. They were just as interested in how this shaped up. He felt a pang of anger at them for this. Could they not anticipate the horrible thing he was about to say? I mean, of course you're not romantically involved, Lieutenant Grady, but after living with 4 healthy young women for as long as you have, surely feelings that are not quite professional have come about. Anything done between myself and the squad is strictly professional, Owen answered flatly. The prosecutor smiled. Here it comes. And Owen had to brace himself. If that's true, Lieutenant, would you object to a reassignment? After all, if this case goes south, you could be very easily just reassign yourself and this all goes away. It becomes the responsibility of their new handler. Why go through this whole trial and facade when your relationship to the girls is simply professional? Why do you care to stick around? You could avoid all this hassle by just reassigning them. Owen had nowhere to hide. It was true. The trial was meant to prove the girl's sentience. But there was deeper context. If the girls were found sentient, then they were simply soldiers. Acting in self-defense. But if they were not sentient, then the Navy would be held responsible for not handling their weapons properly, and the girls would be taken away, and the Navy would take the fall. The easiest thing to do at this point was resign as their handler. The girls were not technically considered soldiers as of yet, and thus reassigning himself wouldn't be much more different than signing over his sidearm for a different one. Just exchanging faulty tools and being done with it. But Owen couldn't do that. Such an action would ruin the relationship he had with the girls. The thing that he was pretending right now didn't exist. Lieutenant Grady, the prosecutor pressed, if the girls are just soldiers under your command, then why are we here? Objection! Badgering the witness! Hammond called. Overruled. Lieutenant Grady will answer. The judge responded, waving the objection aside. Owen groaned and finally conceded the only option he could. The girls are soldiers, Owen replied slowly and carefully. They are naive, inexperienced, and in many ways ignorant. They require proper handling, time, and care to be used effectively. They're a lot like dogs. They respond well to people they trust, and I have the good fortune of being someone they trust, and thus they respond well to me. If the Navy expects them to work at maximum efficiency, then I'm necessary to lead the Raptor squad. Anyone else would be hard for the girls to trust. So your relationship is necessary for them to perform at their best. Yes. It has nothing to do with love or compassion. Those things can't be afforded in our line of work. I care about the girls because they are an essential unit that the Navy needs to use right now in these confusing extra-species circumstances we find ourselves in. Without the Raptor squad as a test case, we have no basis on the potential of an extra-species response team. This is the prototype, the beta. As such, these things must be handled delicately, and therefore I am needed. But as I said, there is nothing between myself and the squad that would be considered more than professional and business. Owen had said it. And as he glanced at Charlie and Blue, there was an obvious expression of disappointment and even crestfallen disbelief. He'd worked so hard to show these girls he cared about them, that he wanted them to rely on him like they were family, and now, in front of the entire court, he'd announced it was all an act to keep them in line, a means of earning trust to make them efficient. His heart broke with the force of bones shattering. The prosecutor stared him up and down and then stepped back. The people rest, he replied. Hammond rose to his feet quickly. Your Honor, I move for a directed verdict. The room erupted into a hushed hum of disbelief, and Owen found himself staring around at everyone, surprised by Hammond's suggestion. On what grounds? The people's case hinges on the argument that the girls are not cognizant of their actions and feelings, and we've proven through this trial they are more than cognizant. I think that's more than enough to consider the facts as they stand. The judge looked from him to the prosecutor and then inhaled slowly. As he exhaled a long and thoughtful sigh, he nodded. Will the people in the defense rise? The two tables followed his direction quickly and willingly, climbing to their feet. Blue and Charlie stumbled up fast, standing at attention, and the judge waited a moment for dramatic emphasis before carrying on. As soldiers, it's our duty to monitor our weapons, to clean them, care for them, and know how to use them properly. With these interspecies exchange programs in place, and the advocation of extra-species soldiers, the question has been raised whether we consider them soldiers or another form of weapon to be used. I've always stood impartial, and I was interested to finally see for myself which side held water. After hearing the testimonies of Charlie and Blue, I'm convinced of three things that I was not previously. The first is that the raptors in this room are some of the most fierce and frightening fighting machines I've ever seen. To think that only 4 of you could engage a force of hostiles over 4 times your size is astounding, and the Navy should reconsider its stance on how to best utilize you, he explained harshly. Charlie's face fell in disappointment, and Blue wrapped an arm around her. But the second is that despite your clear killing powers, you are empathetic towards others, even humans. You clearly care about lives lost and lives saved, which is something no gun could ever do. Therefore, I can see that you are cognizant and thus fully in control of your actions and capable of thinking rationally, and that is beyond doubt. He ran a hand through his hair and snorted with an almost laugh. And thirdly, I hope that this little experiment is a success. If we could have more units like yours associated with the armed forces, I can't begin to imagine the benefit that might be for our country. He then raised his gavel. I find the Raptor Squad and Owen Grady not guilty on the grounds of self-defense in the line of duty, as per any other commissioned Navy operative. This court is dismissed. Now get the hell out of my courtroom. Blue nearly collapsed from the leaf, and Charlie squealed, jumping up and down in a completely unreserved fashion. Owen ran to both girls and threw his arms around them in a tight hug, and for a moment the awkwardness was past. He knew that what he'd said would be brought up later. He knew there was no simply taking it back. He prayed with all his heart that Blue and Charlie would forgive him, but for now, they were still together and they were safe. Hammond nodded and shook Owen's hand, both giving continuous thank yous to one another.
Does this mean we can go home now?
Charlie asked. Yeah, it does. We'll pick up Delta and Echo and head home right away, Owen answered.
Home. Sounds wonderful, Blue sighed.
Owen glanced at her, and though she was smiling, there was a shadow of a doubt in her eye. Charlie didn't notice anything and was running to Hammond to thank him, forcing her way through dozens of onlookers who were simply trying to snag a glimpse of the raptor. Blue, about what I said.
Alpha, you said what you needed to say,
she said stiffly, straightening her back and forcing her smile. Forced, though, it was forced, and Owen couldn't deny it. Blue, you girls mean more to me than...
No, sir, you were right, Blue interjected. We're soldiers, and we have to trust our commanding officers. There was no wrong in what you said. Don't feel ashamed of it.
I'm not ashamed of it, Blue, Owen muttered. I want you to know that it's not how I really feel. Blue finally relaxed a little, but the faint shadow of disappointment was still there. It would have to do for now, but one thing was for sure. The group was together again, even if a cloud hung over their heads for a long time to come. Owen did what he had to do, even if it hurt, but he couldn't help asking if it had been worth it. That no-good bastard! Hoskins hissed from the lab desk. The doctor on the other side of it, a short Asian man with cut-close hair and slanted eyes, was sipping tea calmly behind his desk, gazing at the lab notes to the corner of the white room. There were glass walls on all sides, all showing the lab work going on outside. A yellow tint was made on the windows, giving him the illusion that they were surrounded by a wall of gold or amber. There was a soft hum of generators powering the equipment around them. I can't believe it. I can't believe that son of a bitch! Relax, Hoskins, the Asian doctor replied. Relax, Hoskins hissed. What the hell do you mean, relax?
I mean that things are still proceeding on schedule, and there's no immediate need for raptors yet.
The longer we sit on this, the more likely there's an investigation. Do you know what the media's going to hit us with if they find out?
The raptors don't talk about this island, and even if they do, they don't know what's been going on here. They have no recollection or knowledge of the operation. I highly recommend that we think on the matter at hand.
Hoskins paused and glanced back at the good doctor. And what's that supposed to mean, Henry?
It means she's reached maturity,
Henry answered with a smile.
Would you like to meet her?
Henry stood up from his desk with his teacup still in hand and walked past Hoskins, out of the lab door and down a long, blank hallway. There were various doors and gates leading off to different locations on the compound. Each door and gate had signs and numbers on them, marking what was inside, where the path led to, and the quantity. But at the farthest end of the hall was a door marked with the letter I and a number 2 that was scratched on it, that was scratched out and replaced with the number 1. Henry pressed his hand on the pad and the door slid open. The path beyond the door led out to a walkway with a bulletproof plexiglass, walls and roof around it, allowing Hoskins and Henry to look out, but nothing to get in. They stood on this elevated pathway looking down at a paddock nearly 2 acres in radius, with a jungle fauna all around. Below them, sleeping in a patch of the tall grass, was a figure that made Hoskins' blood curdle and his hair stand on end. Its hair was white, and its body was large, nearly 9 feet high if it were standing. Spines ran along its back, and there were traces of red stains around its lips, which Hoskins didn't want to speculate on what left them. It was horrifying, and yet striking at the same time. She's terrifying, Hoskins whispered.
Precisely, Henry agreed. And she's almost ready. I'll be calling our financiers at the Navy to discuss next steps. But for now, you can see why the Raptors are not our top priority right now. If we can have her fitted, trained, and ready for deployment, no one will even care about the Raptor squad.
I ever tell you that you're one optimistic son of a bitch? Hoskins muttered. If that thing is as dangerous as you've claimed, I ain't sure what kind of man could train it.
Definitely not our Lieutenant Grady, Henry scowled. It was a mistake to trust the Raptors to his care. He's too sentimental. They're all animals at the end of the day. All these extra species people are more animalistic than society would like to admit. If you sympathize with them, it only detracts from the animalistic tendencies that separate them from us. What use is there in domesticating these people when it is their wild nature that so intrigues us to begin with? The world is boring enough as it is, in my opinion. Why take all the fun out of it?
And you think this will make it more fun?
Hoskins asked. No, but it will certainly make things more interesting, Henry answered. Hoskins turned, walking to the door. Are we done?
Get me the hell out of here. I don't know what scares me more, that monster or you, Dr. Wu.
As the two walked out of the pathway, the creature in the paddock opened a single yellow eye, tracking their movements and smiling to itself. It now knew how they got in, and how it could get out.
All right. And that was chapter 12 of the Raptor Girls. I think there are... Yep, there's only one more chapter to read, and then there are the two fan chapters. Two fan stories that I wrote that are not connected to the main story, but are just kind of funny stories. One is called Everyday Life with Raptors Full Moon... what was it? Let me check. Full Moon Special. Yeah, that was a joke one that I wrote. And the other is The Raptors Read a Story. So. All right. So, I hope y'all enjoyed everything. Did y'all enjoy the stories tonight? Tomiki, Monster Club, Raptors. Yeah, I think that'll be all for tonight. Now, let me ask a question before we go. Do y'all want me to continue reading The Tale of Tomiki? I don't mean tonight. I mean, should we make that a new regular reading thing for the streams? Because I'm thinking of what to replace New Epic with, and I was trying Tale of Tomiki. If y'all like that, I will continue reading that. If not, we'll pick something else. Well, go ahead and close it. Well, actually, let me pull this out real quick. I'll show one more image to you guys real fast. One more image I want to show, and then we'll call it a night. I did want to share this. It's another image of Tomiki. I really like it though. 1 second. Oh, hold on. It didn't save the way I wanted it to. Oh, there it is. It did save. That's weird. There we go. Found it. Okay. Okay. Yep, there it is. Image of Tomiki in his Super Saiyan form. Yep, and that picture will occur later in the story. Tomiki was actually one of the first superheroes I ever wrote. I've written more since him, but he was one of the first. All right, well, I can tell y'all are tired and not as invested in this part, so we'll probably call it there. All right, well, guys, thank you very much for watching and for listening. I really had a good time. We'll probably pick up again next Monday, should we have time to do so. And tomorrow, I don't know what's going to happen. We'll have to see. I'm not working tomorrow, I don't think, so I should have some time to work on a video or a story. We'll see. And who knows, I might stream something tomorrow. We'll talk about it. We'll see. I'll talk to Lark, see what we can do. And I may post a poll on Discord. We may do Batman. We may do this. I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, thank you guys so much. Had a great time. And as always, I will see you in my next video. Take care.